Chapter 1. In the swaying carriage, Lin Yi rubbed his head, feeling a headache coming on. He raised his eyes and quickly scanned his surroundings. The luxurious carriage made of brocade, the long swords and short knives hanging on both sides, and the simple dirt road outside the carriage all showed that Lin Yi was now in another world. However, there was only one thought in Lin Ye's mind at that moment. Who is trying to kill me? Lin Ye's background in his previous life was not low. He was the illegitimate son of the Nanyang Chinese Lin family. In his previous life, Lin Yi was very open-minded. He was an illegitimate son and the youngest. His elder brother was already over 40 years old and controlled half of the family's business. The other brothers were not useless either. They all more or less controlled some power in the family. As the youngest Lin Yi, what did he have to compete with the others? Compete with them? It was not that Lin Yi did not live up to expectations, but he really did not have a chance. Therefore, in his previous life, Lin Yi had never competed for anything. He had been a useless hedonist, enjoying himself to his heart's content. Recently, Lin Yi had become addicted to a newly developed game, Pugilistic World. It combined the backgrounds of countless martial arts worlds. The scenery, characters, and plot were all grand and majestic. Most importantly, it was incomparably realistic. It was as if it was another virtual world. Lin Yi was instantly addicted to this game. Later on, Pugilistic World's technology was innovated. After releasing the third version of the story, holographic game helmets were immediately released. Lin Yi relied on his own wealth to obtain the first batch of helmets. However, as soon as he put it on, the entire helmet exploded. Lin Yi knew very well that this had nothing to do with the game company. The safety of the helmet had been tested. Forget about exploding, it could not even cause an electric shock. The only thing Lin Yi could not understand was that he had already acted so harmless and useless. Why would someone still want to kill him? Perhaps his decision not to compete for anything was wrong from the beginning? Right at this moment, countless memories surged into Lin Yi's mind, and it instantly caused him to groan in pain. His eyes revealed a wisp of ruthlessness, and he only calmed down after a long while. Lin Yi rubbed his head. He had inherited all the memories of this body and even some of its personality. Was he Lin Yi or the illegitimate son of the Chu family in Tongzhou Prefecture, Chu Xiao? In this life, his name was Chu Xiao. He was the illegitimate son of the Chu clan in Wei County of Yan Kingdom. Of the 4 sons of the Chu clan, he was ranked second. However, his birth mother was only an ordinary concubine, and she died during childbirth, so he was not valued in the Chu clan. Chu Xiao used to be cowardly and reckless. He stood on the side of his eldest brother, Chu Kai, in the struggle for the position of clan head. As a result, he angered his third brother, who was also qualified to compete for the position of clan head. He was framed by his third brother, and was punished to be a steward of the Chu family's mining area in Nanshan, Wei County. The Chu clan was a large clan in the Tongzhou Prefecture, and the steward also held a portion of the clan's power. However, the Nanshan mining area was not a good job. The miners were all criminals and murderers who the Chu clan had bought from the government at a very low price. A single mistake could lead to a riot. In the past, several of the stewards of the Chu clan in the Nanshan mining area had died in the riots of these murderers. Even though Chu Xiao had been here for a year, these murderers had not rioted. It could only be said that Chu Xiao was very lucky. Originally, Chu Xiao was going to stay in the Nanshan mining area for 3 years. But recently the Chu clan had decided to choose a successor. Even though he was an illegitimate son who had made mistakes, he was still qualified to participate. Therefore, Chu Xiao had been summoned back to the Chu clan in advance. Chu Xiao picked up a short knife hanging in the carriage and unsheathed it. With a soft hum, the knife reflected a handsome man in his early 20s, but with a hint of gloominess. In this life, his appearance was not bad, but for some reason, Chu Xiao felt that his face was somewhat familiar. Suddenly, Chu Xiao thought of something, and the knife fell to the ground. He seemed to know who he was. Before Chu Xiao's transmigration, the Pugilistic World had already updated 2 versions of the plot. The third version had not yet begun, and there was only a plot introduction. The most important part of the third version of the plot was the final villain boss, Demon Lord Chu Xiao. Demon Lord Chu Xiao was born in the Chu clan in the Tongzhou Prefecture of the Wei County of the Yan Kingdom. After the family incident, he experienced a great change in personality, and finally embarked on the path of evil. At the end of the plot introduction, Demon Lord Chu Xiu re-established the incomparably glorious Kunlun devil cult of 1,000 years ago. He led the 4 great demon lords under his command to dominate the martial world, and their demonic flames soared to the sky. No wonder Chu Xiu felt that his appearance was somewhat familiar. He had not noticed it before, but now that he thought about his background and his age, he realized that he was the final villain boss of the 3rd version of the game, Demon Lord Chu Xiu. After understanding this truth, Chu Xiu did not know whether he should cry or laugh. He was destined to be a famous figure in the martial world in the future, but was there a need to guess the final outcome? Wasn't the final villain boss of any game meant to be defeated? Picking up the short knife on the ground, Chu Xiu lightly flicked the blade, and a hint of gloominess appeared in his eyes. He mumbled, "Destined to be defeated? Hee, in my previous life, I did not fight or snatch, but in the end, I died a horrible death. Since the heavens have given me another chance, then in this life, I will take the initiative to fight and snatch. It's better for me to kill someone than for them to kill me." At this moment, the door of the carriage was opened, and a charming and delicate maid seemed to have heard the commotion in the carriage, and came in. She looked at Chu Xiu in astonishment and asked, "Young master, did something happen?" Looking at this maid, whose appearance and beauty were both top-notch, the corners of Chu Xiu's mouth curled into a sinister smile. The maid in front of him was called Yu, and she was the mother of the Chu family's 3rd son, Chu Sheng. She was also someone sent by his 2nd mother. It was laughable that Chu Xiu had actually thought that this maid was assigned to him by the family, and had even doted on her. In the end, not only had Yu used his name to act like a tyrant in the Nanshan mining area, causing his reputation to be completely ruined by the servants of the Chu family, she had even secretly encouraged him to provoke and torture criminals, wanting to incite a riot. It was obvious that she wanted to put him to death. Looking at Yu, Chu Xiu suddenly grinned. "It's nothing, I just dropped my knife on the ground." For some reason, when Yu saw Chu Xiu's smile, she suddenly felt a little gloomy, and her hair stood on end. However, Yu did not care too much. She gave Chu Xiu a sweet smile and said, "Young master, it's been raining recently, so it's not easy to walk on the official road. Why don't we take the small path in Yuanbao town? It's closer there." Chu Xiu's face had a hint of a smile that was not a smile, and said, "Take the small path in Yuanbao town? But I heard that these small paths are all opened under the barren mountains and forests of Shangmang Mountain. It's very easy to encounter bandits there." Yu said coquettishly, "It's all just a rumor. Many of the caravans going to and fro the Tongzhou prefecture take the small path. Moreover, this servant still wants to return to the residence to take a bath. This servant hasn't taken a bath many times in the past year in the Nanshan mining area, and my body is already smelly." In the past, when Yu acted like a spoiled child, Chu Xiu would definitely embrace her, comfort her, and satisfy her requests. But now, Chu Xiu was only looking at her with a creepy smile on his face. This caused Yu to panic. At this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly stretched out his hand and pinched Yu's tender face. Only when Yu almost cried out in pain did he let go and say, "All right, then let's go to Yuanbao town." Yu rubbed her face. She suddenly felt that the Chu Xiu in front of her was a little unfamiliar, as if he was a completely different person. But when she thought of the news that 2nd Madam had sent a few days ago and her promise to her, Yu immediately threw these doubts to the back of her mind. Chu Xiu saw the sweet smile on Yu's face and wanted to get closer. He said indifferently, "Go and instruct the servants to change the route to Yuanbao town. Rest for a night there before continuing." Looking at Yu's figure walking out, Chu Xiu's face revealed a look of disdain. She's just a stupid woman without any tricks. But his body in this life seemed to be even more stupid. He was actually played around by such a woman. Who knows what kind of stimulation he received in the end to become the demon lord with monstrous demonic flames. This Yu insisted on taking the small path to Yuanbao town. Chu Xiu was sure that there was definitely something wrong with this. But he still agreed, because there was an opportunity in Yuanbao town. In this life, Chu Xiu quickly understood what his true advantage was. It was not his identity as the future demon lord, but his familiarity with the plot of the first 2 versions of the game. Although Chu Xiu would become the leader of the Kunlun devil cult in the future, that was only the plot introduction. There were definitely no details about his future experiences in the plot introduction. And as a loyal player of Pugilistic World, Chu Xiu could be said to be very clear about the plot of the first two versions of the game. Even if he had not experienced some of it, he had looked up information on the forums and other places to fill in the gaps. According to the time, Chu Xiu should be in the early stages of the first version of the plot. There should be more than 20 years before the third version of the plot begins. It could be said that Chu Xiu's true advantage was that he knew all the big and small history of this world for the past 20 years. And now, in Yuanbao Town, if Chu Xiu remembered correctly, there was a great opportunity waiting for him. Chapter 2. Yuanbao Town was just a small town, but it was very prosperous. This was because the small roads around it could quickly lead to a few prefectures in the north of Wei County, so a large number of merchants came and went. After the carriage arrived at Yuanbao Town, Chu Xiu arranged an inn and took Yu and a dozen servants of the Chu family to stroll around Yuanbao Town. Chu Xiu looked around. Yu was a little bored. The Tongzhou prefecture was a large city in Wei County, and it was much more prosperous than this small town. What was there to see here? At this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly discovered something and walked straight to a shop that sold secret boxes. This so-called secret box was also a major feature of the great pugilistic world. In the great pugilistic world, martial arts flourished. However, 10,000 years ago, it experienced a great calamity, causing a natural disaster to descend. Countless martial arts sects were destroyed in this apocalyptic world. Before the calamity began, a formation grandmaster had researched something called a secret box. It was used to store the sect's treasures, ancient books, and other things to prevent them from being damaged during the calamity. The core of the secret box was its formation. It could be used to strengthen and seal the secret box, increasing its effectiveness. Unfortunately, it had been lost. The material of the secret box could be anything. Gold, iron, stone, or even wood could be used. In any case, the stronger the material of the secret box, the more power the formation could unleash. The size and shape of the secret box were also random. In any case, the formation was the same. The size and shape of the secret box depended on what the sect that made it wanted to store in it. Therefore, after the great ancient calamity, the survivors excavated the ruins of countless sects and found a large number of such secret boxes. Some people opened the secret box and found peerless techniques, while others found rare treasures. Of course, not all the secret boxes contained treasures. Most of the secret boxes were empty or contained some useless things. The empty secret boxes were prepared by the sects in advance. The formation was also engraved so that they could be used at any time. They looked no different from the secret boxes that contained things. There were also some secret boxes that contained items that were of greater significance to martial artists, but in reality, they were not of much value. For example, a sword used by an expert when he was young, a handkerchief given by a lover, and so on. Because of that, there were good and bad items in the secret boxes. Furthermore, due to the uniqueness of the formation, no one in the Jianghu could see what was going on inside from the outside. Hence, buying a secret box depended entirely on one's own experience and luck. Experienced people could analyze the material, shape, and even the decorative patterns on the box to determine the origin of the box and what was inside. Of course, most people relied on luck. The shop that sold the secret boxes in the town was very small. There were only a dozen or so secret boxes placed on the table. They were of different shapes and materials, but the only thing they had in common was that they were all very cheap. The materials used were ordinary metals and stones, which was why they were sold in a small town like Ingot Town. Chu Xiu asked the shopkeeper, "Is this the only shop in Ingot Town that sells secret boxes?" The shopkeeper didn't even raise his head. He just nodded lazily and said, "Of course it's just me. No matter how trashy a secret box is, it costs at least 10 taels of silver to buy one. 99% of the people in the Jianghu that come to Ingot Town are escorts, a bunch of poor people. They can't even earn 10 silver from a single escort. How could they be willing to take out 10 silver to gamble their luck?" At this moment, the shopkeeper raised his head and saw that Chu Xiu was wearing brocade clothes and had a servant girl by his side. His fat face couldn't help but reveal a trace of a flattering smile as he said, "That bunch of poor people can't afford to buy a secret box, but young master can definitely. These secret boxes were found in the ruins of the southern barbaric mountains a year ago. The price is absolutely reasonable." Hearing the shopkeeper say this, Chu Xiu's eyes couldn't help but reveal a trace of a bright light. If he didn't remember wrongly, around this period of time, There was a fellow who was originally a servant who bought an ordinary secret box in Ingot Town. He didn't expect that there would be a supreme cultivation method within it. It was by relying on this cultivation method that that person moved unhindered in the Jianghu and made a great name for himself. He even established a not small sect and became the founder of a sect. Chu Xiao had just arrived in this world. What he urgently needed now was a sufficiently powerful cultivation method. As a large family in the Tong Prefecture, their Chu family naturally had a cultivation method passed down. It was called the Vast Sea Mantra. After mastering it, one's foundation would be solid and their inner strength would be as powerful as the vast sea. But as a bastard son, Chu Xiao wasn't valued since he was young. He didn't have medicinal pills or other resources, and he didn't have the guidance of the elders in the family. So after cultivating for many years, he was barely able to cross the threshold of this cultivation method. His own cultivation on the martial Tao was pitifully low, and he hadn't even stepped into the blood condensation realm. If you wanted to cross the threshold of the martial Tao, you first had to go through the 3 body refinement realms. The first step of the 3 body refinement realms was to temper the muscles and bones. This realm was called the body refinement realm. It tempered the body, strengthening the muscles and bones, and allowing one's strength to surpass others. Almost 99% of the martial artists in the Jianghu were at the body refinement realm because this realm was the easiest. Some people didn't even know any inner strength, and only cultivated some superficial external skills to reach the body refinement realm. And above the body refinement realm was the blood condensation realm. This realm was from the outside to the inside. After tempering the muscles and bones, one could then condense the body's blood and qi, causing the thin blood and qi to thicken until it was like lead mercury. Only then could one be considered to have reached the blood condensation realm. This realm was comparatively more difficult. Without an inner strength cultivation method, martial artists who couldn't cultivate inner strength had almost no chance of reaching the blood condensation realm. Just as Chu Xiao was thinking about these things, a mediocre-looking young man walked in and said, "Shopkeeper, give me 2 secret boxes." If an ordinary person came to buy a secret box, the shopkeeper would definitely be happy. But when he saw this young man, he shook his head and said, "Li Jing, you worked so hard as a servant for the Tongzhou Prefecture's Li family, but all the money you earned has been thrown into these secret boxes. Listen to me, this thing is not something you can play with. You're a smart kid. You've only been in the Li family for a few years, but you've already been recognized by the 3rd young master of the Li family and given the surname Li. You've even been transferred from the kitchen to the caravan. Take this money and make friends with some of the stewards of the Li family. Maybe in the future you'll also become a steward." Li Jing laughed and said, "Even if I become a steward, I'll only be a servant of the Li family. Who knows, I might really be able to open some peerless divine technique from these secret boxes and soar to the top." The shopkeeper shook his head. Opening a peerless divine technique? How could it be so easy? There were indeed many legends in the pugilistic world about people opening treasures from seemingly unremarkable secret boxes. However, that was still a minority. Most of the time, it was a waste of money, and the chances were pitifully low. However, the shopkeeper himself was selling secret boxes. He saw that Li Jing was a pitiful person, so he gave him a few words of advice. But since Li Jing insisted on buying, how could he not sell? Just as he was about to take the secret boxes, Chu Xiao suddenly said, "Wait, shopkeeper, I want all of these secret boxes." When the shopkeeper called out Li Jing's name and identity, Chu Xiao thought of his identity. He was the martial artist who had once obtained a great opportunity in Yuanbao town. He was originally a servant, but in the end, he relied on the divine technique opened in the secret boxes to dominate the pugilistic world and become an overlord. Moreover, from Li Jing's words, he was indeed the kind of person who was unwilling to be ordinary. Otherwise, an unambitious trash would not be able to reach that step even if he opened a divine technique. In the end, it was very likely that he would be killed and his divine technique stolen. Thinking of this, Chu Xiao secretly felt lucky. He had really come in time. He only knew that there was such a thing, but he did not know the exact time. If he had come a step later, the opportunity would have been gone. Li Jing frowned and said, "Young master, I said that I wanted to buy them first." Chu Xiao glanced at him and said, "Now I say that I want all of them. Do you have any objections?" Li Jing's face showed a trace of anger. He coldly snorted and said, "Young master, do you think that I, Li Jing, am just a servant and that I can be bullied? I am from the Tongzhou Prefecture's Li family. The Tongzhou Prefecture was a big city in Wei County, and the Li family was one of the 3 big families in the Tongzhou Prefecture. Although he was only a servant of the Li family, some of the smaller and run-down clans couldn't compare to him. Even some of the smaller clans had to bow and scrape in front of the steward of the Li family. Chu Xiu looked at him and sneered. Previously, you said that you did not want to be a servant for the rest of your life. Now that things have come to this, you still want to use the Li family to intimidate me. You are a servant, and you want to use the Li family to suppress me? You don't know what you are talking about. As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, a few servants behind him immediately surrounded him and looked at Li Jing fiercely. He had learned martial arts because he was appreciated by the Li family's 3rd young master. However, he was a servant after all. What he learned was only some superficial martial arts. His strength was only at the body tempering realm. Naturally, he could not defeat so many people. Therefore, he could only watch helplessly as Chu Xiu took away the dozen or so secret boxes in the shop. For some reason, apart from feeling humiliated, he felt even more heartache, as if something important had been taken away from him. After Chu Xiu left, Li Jing gritted his teeth. This matter was definitely not over. He had been in the Li family for so many years. Although he was only a servant, he was the Li family's 3rd young master. He had made friends with many big shots. At this time, after Chu Xiu got the secret box, he returned to the inn and drove everyone out to check the secret boxes one by one. Because the secret box was used to store things, the way to open it was very simple. Drop a drop of blood on the secret box, and the formation would naturally be unlocked. Of course, once the secret box was opened, because the sealing formation had been lost, the secret box would be completely scrapped and could no longer be used. This also put an end to the idea of fishing in troubled waters with an empty secret box. There were a total of 17 boxes. Chu Xiu opened 8 of them in succession, but 7 of them were empty. One of them had a booklet inside, but it had long since decayed. Furthermore, it was not a cultivation technique, but a booklet that recorded the details of a sect's assets. It was useless. Until Chu Xiu opened the 9th secret box. The secret box was only made of brown stone. It was only the size of a palm. There were no patterns or decorations on it, and it looked very casual. But after opening it, there was an ancient jade inside, emitting a faint warm light. In ancient times, in order to better preserve the cultivation method, some experts would not write the cultivation method on paper. Instead, they would engrave the cultivation method in the best jade with their spirit mark. As long as there was no accident, it would not be damaged for thousands of years. This is it. Chu Xiu held the jade slip with excitement. Suddenly, a large number of words poured into Chu Xiu's mind. Taoism Secret Book, Xiantian Skill. The Xiantian skill that Chu Xiu had obtained was a branch of Taoism in ancient times. It was the inherited skill of Chuanjin sect. It cultivated the Xiantian true qi, which could resist all kinds of diseases, balance the real and the virtual, nourish the foundation, and make the true qi endless. Taoism cultivation method paid the most attention to the foundation, and it was also the most moderate. Although this Xiantian skill did not seem special at first glance, it was rated as a 4th-grade cultivation method in the original plot. There were strong and weak people, and so did the strength of cultivation method. Although the strength of cultivation method was related to the person who practiced it, and some talented people could even dominate the Jianghu with low-level cultivation method, they were only a minority. Therefore, the cultivation method in the Jianghu was roughly divided into several grades. Normal cultivation method had a total of 9 grades. The 1st grade was the lowest, and the 9th grade was the highest. Among them, the first 3 grades of cultivation method could basically be the inherited cultivation method of a small sect. Ordinary people in the Jianghu could only be regarded as punches and kicks. They were not even qualified for the 1st grade cultivation method. The middle 3 grades of cultivation method were regarded as treasures in the whole Jianghu, and could be used to establish a sect. As for the last 3 grades of cultivation method, they were basically in the hands of some big sects in the Jianghu, and very few were in the hands of individuals. There were still 2 grades above the 9 grades. One of them was the supreme cultivation method, which could be used to dominate the Jianghu and become the supreme master of the martial arts world. The other was the peerless cultivation method, which, just like its name, was the best in the world at that time. It was a legendary existence. In addition to these grades, there were some strange cultivation methods in the Jianghu, which could not be measured by grades. Some people were weak when they practiced it, but some people were very strong when they practiced it. Some strange cultivation methods had some strange effects, which could not be measured by power alone. This innate function was evaluated as the fourth grade by later generations, and it was naturally reasonable that it could be used as a cultivation method to establish a sect. The characteristic of the cultivation method of Taoism to nourish the foundation was exerted to the extreme by the Xiantian cultivation method. Ordinary martial artists needed to lay a good foundation since they were young. The older they were, the slower their progress would be. However, the Xiantian cultivation method was different. It could quickly wash and refine the martial artist's body. No matter how old they were, they could reshape their foundation. In the original plot, Li Jing got the Xiantian cultivation method, but he was not young anymore. He had passed the best stage of practicing martial arts. It was because of the Xiantian cultivation method that he could reshape his foundation and make rapid progress in his realm. His foundation was even stronger than those disciples of aristocratic families who practiced martial arts since childhood. At present, Chu Xiu's situation was similar to that of Li Jing. Although he was born in the Chu family, in fact, there was no special person to teach him when he was young. There was basically no elixir for him to build the foundation, so his foundation was extremely poor. But now, with the Xiantian cultivation method, Chu Xiu could make up for this, and even make his starting point in the martial arts road higher than the martial artists of the same realm. Looking at the remaining secret box in front of him, Chu Xiu also opened it together. He did not expect to find another cultivation method, but this cultivation method did not appear in the original plot. Of course, it was possible that it had appeared, but Chu Xiu did not know. This cultivation method was not an internal force, but a strange bladesmanship called Azure Dragon in the sleeve. Chu Xiu's martial arts was just at the beginning. Except for those famous cultivation methods in the original plot, even if other cultivation methods were placed in front of him, he could not tell whether they were good or bad. But in his eyes now, this Azure Dragon in the sleeve was much better than the ordinary martial arts skills of the first grade passed down in the Chu family. The weakest should be the second grade. The bladesmanship of the Azure Dragon in the sleeve paid particular attention to the technique of hiding the blade. The shape of the blade was hidden in the sleeve, and the blade intent was hidden in the body. When the blade was slashed out, it was like an Azure Dragon coming out of the sea, with infinite power. The blade was the Azure Dragon, and the sleeve was the sea with the Azure Dragon hidden. The whole bladesmanship was very simple, and its charm was only the moment when the Azure Dragon came out of the sea. The internal force that the Chu family mainly practiced was the vast sea mental strength. As for the other martial arts movements, they were not too strong. They were all ordinary martial arts, such as fist, foot, palm, saber, spear, stick, and so on, the choice of which depended on one's preference. Although Chu Xiu could not see the depth of the Azure Dragon in the sleeve, he was sure that it was much better than the simple bladesmanship of the Chu family. And just as Chu Xiu opened the secret box, Li Jing, who was unwilling to be robbed by Chu Xiu, also went to another inn in Yuanbao town to find a backer. Chapter 3. The Li family was one of the three great clans of the Tong state. They had a lot of businesses, and every year, they would send a few caravans with a large number of warriors to guard against bandits. This time, they dared to take a remote path like Ingot Town because they had brought a lot of people with them. They weren't afraid of the bandits, who were mostly just a motley crew. Although Li Jing was a servant of the Li family, he had been recognized by the third young master of the Li family and was transferred to the caravan. Although he wasn't a steward, he could be considered a small leader. At this time, in another inn in Ingot Town, Li Jing walked to the door of an upper room. Hearing the sounds of laughter coming from inside, he knocked on the door. A lazy voice said, "Come in." He pushed open the door and saw a man in his 30s in an embroidered robe holding a seductive woman in his arms. There were some dishes and wine on the table, and there were also two stewards of the caravan accompanying them. Each of them had an average-looking woman by their side. The person in front of him was the leader of the Li family's caravan, Li Tong. He was greedy and lustful, and his ability and strength were average. It was obvious from his current behavior. Even in a small place like Ingot Town, he still had to prepare wine and women to enjoy. He could even take in such a beautiful woman. The reason why this kind of person could become the leader of the caravan was all because of Li Tong's background. He was from a branch family of the Li family. Although he was greedy and lustful, and his ability was average, he could at least get things done. At least he was better than those incompetent trash. He was given 2 capable stewards to be in charge of the caravan. After all these years, there hadn't been any problems. So Li Tong's status in the Li family had increased. Looking at Li Tong, Li Jing's eyes faintly revealed a trace of unwillingness and disdain. If this kind of trash could become the leader of the caravan, then no matter how capable he was, he would still be a servant even if he became a steward of the Li family in the future. He would have to serve this kind of trash. Although this was what he thought, Li Jing still squeezed out a smile and cupped his hands. Greetings, 7th Master. Because Li Tong was ranked 7th in his generation, the servants of the Li family all called him 7th Master. Seeing Li Jing, Li Tong smiled and waved his hand, saying, "Oh, it's Li Jing. Come, come, come. Sit down and have some wine. I'll get the manager to call a lady up. Don't look down on them. It's good enough that there are girls in this small place. When we get back to Tongzhou Prefecture and receive our reward, I'll invite you to the Intoxicated Flower Tavern." Although Li Tong's ability was average, he wasn't stupid. He knew that he couldn't manage this caravan by himself, so he treated the 2 stewards very well, making them feel deeply grateful to him. Usually, when something happened in the caravan, the 2 stewards would play the bad cop and he would play the good cop. Therefore, in the caravan, Li Tong's prestige was actually the highest. Although Li Jing was only a small leader, he was appreciated by the 3rd young master. According to seniority, although he was the 3rd young master's cousin, in fact, in front of the 3rd young master, he was no different from those stewards, so his attitude towards Li Jing was not bad. Li Jing's face revealed a trace of grievance as he said, "7th Master, I was robbed in town just now." I revealed the Li clan's name, but the other party actually didn't care about the Li clan. What's going on? Someone actually dared to rob someone from my Li clan? Li Tong immediately frowned. After Li Jing narrated the matter to Li Tong with some embellishments, Li Tong immediately snorted and said, "Don't worry, this matter isn't over. Even if it's a servant of my Li clan, those small clans can't afford to offend him." With that, Li Tong ordered a servant of the caravan to find out who the other party was. Yuanbao town wasn't that big, so this kind of thing was very easy to find out. "Thank you, 7th Master, for helping this lowly one." Li Jing hurriedly expressed his thanks. Seeing Li Jing's grateful appearance, Li Tong nodded in satisfaction. This kind of method that didn't require much effort to buy people's hearts was what he was best at. After half an hour, the servant returned and said in a low voice, "7th Master, the other party is from the Chu clan." Hearing this, Li Tong's complexion immediately changed, and he changed into an experienced and prudent tone as he said to Li Jing, "Li Jing, the other party is from the Chu clan. This is going to be a bit troublesome." Among the 3 great clans of the Tong State Prefecture, the Chen clan was fully deserving of being number 1. The Chen clan's patriarch, Shen Mo, was the younger brother of the Wei Prefecture's Azure Wave Sword sect's eldest disciple, Falling Rain Sword, Shen Bai. With such a heavy relationship, even if Shen Mo took over the position of patriarch at the age of 30 and killed 7 Chen clan elders in order to establish his might, no one would dare to say anything. Although the Chu clan had only moved to the Tong State Prefecture 20 years ago, the Chu clan's patriarch, Chu Zongguang, wasn't simple. He had already surpassed the body tempering and blood condensation realms, and reached the Xiantian realm where his blood, qi, tendons, and bones were completely integrated, without any impurities. He was like a newborn baby, and he looked like he was in his early 40s. When my Li clan's patriarch was still alive, he could compete with that old thing Chu Zongguang. But now that the patriarch has passed away, and although the eldest young master, 2nd young master, and 3rd young master are all dragons and phoenixes among men, and have supported the Li clan after the patriarch passed away, and are known as the 3 tigers of the Li clan, there is still a gap between them and the Chu clan. Let's just forget about this matter. A trace of unwillingness flashed in Li Jing's eyes, but he could only obediently nod. At this time, Li Tong subconsciously asked, "Who came from the Chu clan? I don't think I've heard of any caravans from the Chu clan recently. Moreover, the Chu clan's caravans never passed through Yuanbao town." The servant said, "It's the Chu clan's 2nd young master, Chu Xiao." Li Tong stared blankly for a moment, then he laughed and said, "So it's that trash. Li Jing, don't worry, I'll take care of this matter for you." Li Jing was surprised and said, "Isn't that the Chu clan's 2nd young master? He's not just a steward, Can we afford to offend him? Li Tong sneered and said, if it's the Chu clan's steward, I really wouldn't dare to provoke him. Even the Chu clan's steward holds a bit of real power. But this Chu Xiao, I'm really not afraid of him. Don't look at him just because he's the Chu clan's second young master. He's the son of a concubine. Within the Chu clan, he doesn't have any real power, and he's even more cowardly and cowardly. Even the Chu clan's steward doesn't put him in his eyes. I heard that a year ago, he did something stupid, so he was banished to the Chu clan's Nanshan mining area to eat dust. Even if we offend such trash, he wouldn't dare to tell Chu Zongguang. He's afraid that Chu Zongguang will punish him even more severely. After saying that, Li Tong waved his hand and brought his people to find trouble with Chu Xiao. Li Jing followed behind everyone. He didn't know why, but he felt a little uneasy in his heart. Li Tong said that the Chu clan's second young master had a cowardly character and was simply a trash. But the person who snatched the secret box from him was overbearing and had a gloomy expression. Were these two really the same person? Inside the inn, Chu Xiao was playing with a short knife, hiding it in his sleeve. In his mind, he was constantly visualizing the scene of the azure dragon in the sleeve, the scene of the azure dragon emerging from the sea. The azure dragon in the sleeve wasn't a very complicated martial skill, but Chu Xiao could feel that it wouldn't be easy to cultivate it to the great success stage. The limits of this martial skill might be deeper than what Chu Xiao had imagined. At this time, Chu Xiao suddenly heard a noise coming from below the inn. It seemed like someone was shouting his name. Chu Xiao walked down to take a look. His guards were confronting a group of people, and the maid Yue was shrinking in a corner, not daring to make a sound. Seeing Chu Xiao walk down, Li Tong sneered and said, Chu Xiao, you're quite impressive. You even dared to snatch the things of my Li clan. Let me tell you, even a servant of my Li clan isn't that easy to bully. When these words came out, the faces of the Li clan servants that followed Li Tong revealed an excited expression. Clearly, the fact that Li Tong went to find trouble with the Chu clan's second young master for the sake of a servant moved them very much. Seeing the expressions on everyone's faces, a trace of pride flashed in Li Tong's eyes. However, he still spoke in a righteous manner. Chu Xiao, hand over the secret box that you snatched from Li Jing and apologize. Then, this matter will be over. After all, the Li clan and Chu clan are both part of the three great clans of the Tong State Prefecture. I don't want to hurt the harmony between us. Otherwise, you know the consequences. Chu Xiao raised his head to look at Li Tong. In his memory, there really was such a person. However, the previous Chu Xiao wasn't well received within the Chu clan, let alone the other clans. Whether it was the Li clan or the Chen clan, they both viewed him as trash. In any case, the future successor of the Chu clan definitely wouldn't be him, so he wasn't worthy of their attention. However, the only thing that Chu Xiao didn't understand was how cowardly he was before. Even a branch family member of the Li clan dared to be so arrogant towards him? Looking at Li Tong, Chu Xiao's eyes revealed a trace of confusion as he said, Then what if I don't hand it over? Li Tong sneered. The Li clan's servants all surrounded him with an overbearing appearance. Although there were more than a dozen people by Chu Xiao's side, with his status in the Chu clan, there were only 5 or 6 who had truly reached the body-tempering realm. The rest were all servants who truly attended to Chu Xiao's daily needs. And because the Li clan side was a caravan, the servants who had the qualifications to join the Li clan's caravan had all practiced martial arts. They were all body-tempering realm martial artists. At this time, a servant beside Li Tong stood up and pointed at Chu Xiao as he shouted, Seventh Master is giving you face by asking you to hand over the things and apologize. Otherwise, with just the few people you have, don't even think of leaving Ingot Town today. The person who stood up was Li Tong's trusted aide. If he didn't show his loyalty now, then when? Moreover, Seventh Master already said that this Chu Xiao didn't have the slightest bit of authority in the Chu clan. He was even inferior to a steward, so there was nothing to be afraid of. Chu Xiao didn't have the slightest expression on his face. He only said indifferently, Make me unable to leave Ingot Town? Her. A faint laugh that seemed to be mocking sounded. That Li clan servant was just about to say something, but at this moment, his eyes were already filled with a flash of saber light. It was incomparably fast, like a bolt of lightning streaking across the sky. By the time he reacted, he instantly felt a pain in his chest. A short saber had already been stabbed into his chest. As Chu Xiu gently twisted the hilt of the saber, blood continuously spurted out. He wanted to say something, but he could only widen his eyes and gradually lose all signs of life. No one present saw how Chu Xiu drew the saber, and no one noticed where Chu Xiu had hidden the saber. Only when Yu let out an ear-piercing scream from behind did everyone react. This Chu Xiu actually killed someone? He stabbed a person to death without saying a word? Li Tong pointed at Chu Xiu, his face filled with horror. You actually dare? Before he could finish speaking, Chu Xiu had already pulled out the short saber from the servant's chest and directly slashed at him. This scene was something that no one had expected. It was fine if Chu Xiu killed a Li clan servant, but now he also wanted to kill Li Tong? One had to know that Li Tong was the Li clan's steward, and he was also a collateral descendant of the Li clan. No one present expected that Chu Xiu would attack Li Tong, and no one could react in time. Li Tong himself wanted to block it, but this time he only wanted to threaten Chu Xiu. He didn't have any weapons. Moreover, he was used to living a comfortable life and had not experienced many real battles. Even if he had a weapon, he wouldn't be able to block it. Only Li Jing, who was beside him, clenched his teeth and reacted the fastest. He took out a dagger that he carried with him and threw it at Chu Xiu, wanting to block the saber. However, that dagger was directly cut into pieces by Chu Xiu's saber. The blade didn't change in the slightest, and accurately landed on Li Tong's neck. Feeling the ice-cold blade that was still stained with blood on his neck, and thinking about the sudden and ruthless killing of Chu Xiu, Li Tong's legs couldn't help but tremble. Looking at Li Tong, Chu Xiu said in a flat tone, "Trash like you wants to find trouble with me? You simply don't know what you're talking about. Even if I, Chu Xiu, am not welcomed in the Chu clan, I am still the Chu clan's second young master, and Chu Zongguang is my father. But what are you? You're just a collateral descendant, and your position isn't much higher than a steward's. Where did you get the confidence to find trouble with me? Do you believe that even if I kill you on the spot, I will only be punished with confinement and have to kneel in the ancestral hall?" Li Tong immediately trembled. Just now, he had only thought of how weak and easily bullied Chu Xiu was, but he had neglected the nature of their identities. He was only a collateral descendant, and Chu Xiu killing him was indeed a huge disaster. But so what? After all, he was the Chu clan's patriarch, Chu Zongguang's son. Could the Li clan let Chu Xiu pay with his life for a collateral descendant like him? Only now did Li Tong realize what a stupid thing he had done. Chu Xiu moved the dagger away from Li Tong's neck and passed the hilt to him. He said indifferently, "Take the dagger." Li Tong stared blankly for a moment. He didn't know what Chu Xiu meant. "I said take the dagger." Feeling Chu Xiu's ice-cold gaze, Li Tong trembled as he took the dagger. Chu Xiu held the dagger and pointed it at his chest. He stared straight at Li Tong. "Didn't you want to find trouble with me just now? Now that the dagger is in your hands, I'll give you a chance to kill me." Li Tong hurriedly shook his head. What kind of joke was this? If Chu Xiu killed him, he wouldn't have to pay with his life. But if he killed Chu Xiu, not only would he have to pay with his life, even his wife and children would have to pay with their lives. Chu Xiu took a step forward, the dagger pressed against his chest. Chu Xiu's voice was incomparably gloomy. "I said I'll let you kill me." With a clang sound, the dagger fell to the ground. Li Tong's hand trembled, and he couldn't even hold the dagger properly. A trace of ridicule appeared on Chu Xiu's face. He slapped Li Tong's face and sneered. "Trash. I gave you a chance, but you didn't use it. You didn't even dare to kill with a dagger. Who gave you the courage to find trouble with me?" Facing Chu Xiu's insulting actions and ridiculing tone, Li Tong's face flushed red with shame and anger. However, he didn't dare to say anything. Chu Xiu pointed at the entrance of the inn and indifferently said, "Get out of here now. Take that idiot's corpse away and clean it up. Don't cause trouble for the innkeeper." After he finished speaking, Chu Xiu directly turned around and went upstairs. The Chu family's servants and Yu all had dull expressions on their faces. Was this still the Chu Xiu from before? However, they were all frightened today. They didn't dare to think too much and immediately followed Chu Xiu upstairs. At this moment, in the lobby of the inn, Li Jing walked to Li Tong's side and cautiously said, "Seventh master." However, before he could finish speaking, he was directly kicked to the ground by Li Tong. Li Tong's face flushed red as he angrily said, F*ck your mother. It's because of this idiot that caused so much trouble. Just you wait. Even if you have third young master to protect you, I will still make you look good when I return to the Li family. Everyone present looked expressionlessly at Li Jing, who was lying on the ground in a daze. It was because of him that Li Tong had lost so much face today. From now on, his days in the Li family would probably not be easy. Chapter 4. Inside the inn, Chu Xiu rubbed his face in front of the bronze mirror. Just now, he had killed someone without any hesitation. His performance was extremely ruthless, but he didn't feel the slightest discomfort. In his previous life, Chu Xiu had watched underground fighting and killing games in search of excitement, but he had never killed anyone with his own hands. His performance just now was mostly due to the memories of this life. Back in the Chu clan, Chu Xiu had indeed behaved very cowardly. But in a place like the Nanshan mining area, facing all kinds of criminals and murderers, Chu Xiu's original character had been affected by the environment. From cowardice, he had become violent and crazy. In fact, in his memory, he had even killed a few disobedient criminals in the Nanshan mining area. Now, Chu Xiu vaguely understood why in the original world, this body of his had changed from a cowardly bastard son of a clan to the ultimate villain of the third version. The experience in the Nanshan mining area had a great impact on Chu Xiu. Perhaps even the Chu clan themselves had not expected that because of their clan's internal strife, the result was the creation of a great demon that would confuse the world. After nightfall, Chu Xiu suddenly called for one of his subordinates, Gao Bei. Gao Bei was a small leader in charge of the dozen or so subordinates under him. Of course, although he was called a small leader, he was in fact a subordinate, and his position in the Chu clan was very low. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been sent to follow Chu Xiu. In Chu Xiu's memory, Gao Bei's ability was mediocre. He came to the Chu clan as a servant at the age of 10, and had always been doing odd jobs. Although he didn't know how to flatter others, he was very conscientious. It took him almost 10 years to be taught some basic martial arts and reach the body-tempering realm. He followed a caravan to train a few times, but he was still unknown in the Chu clan. A year ago, Chu Xiu had made a big mistake because of his third brother and was banished to the Nanshan mining area. However, he was still the second young master of the Chu clan. Even if he was not valued, at least some reliable subordinates had to be prepared for him. Therefore, this conscientious Gao Bei was thrown to Chu Xiu's side. However, he was an honest man, so he had no complaints. In the past year, staying by Chu Xiu's side was no different from staying in the Chu clan. "Young master, you were looking for me?" Gao Bei carefully walked in and looked at Chu Xiu. There was a hint of fear in his eyes. Clearly, the events of the day had given him a great shock. Chu Xiu looked at Gao Bei and said calmly, "Gao Bei, you have been in my Chu clan for more than 10 years, and you have been working conscientiously. In the end, you are still a servant, receiving 2 taels of silver a month, which is only slightly higher than the janitor's. Those who entered the Chu clan with you have either been transferred to a caravan, or become shopkeepers of various shops, and even become stewards of the Chu clan. Don't you feel unhappy?" Gao Bei pursed his lips. He was not really stupid. Seeing that his companions who entered the Chu clan with him had gone further than him, he was the stupidest. He didn't know how to flatter others, and he always offended others. Therefore he had always been at the bottom. Of course, he would feel uncomfortable. However, Gao Bei's only good point was that he knew his own limits. He smiled bitterly at Chu Xiu and said, "Young master, I, Gao Bei, am stupid in both speech and character. After all these years, the Chu clan hasn't chased me out, and even allowed me to become a guard that serves the second young master. This lowly one is already content." Chu Xiu looked straight into Gao Bei's eyes and said, "No, you're not satisfied. Even a stray dog wouldn't be willing to eat leftovers after you fed it with meat for a year. Even dogs are like this, not to mention humans. Humans will never be satisfied." Chu Xiu's eyes seemed to be able to see through his eyes and into his heart, which made Gao Bei take a step back. His mouth moved, but he didn't know what to say. Withdrawing his eyes, Chu Xiu said slowly, "You know what my status is in the Chu clan. You've been sent to serve me, so we're bound together." Gao Bei hurriedly said, "I understand." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "No, you don't understand. Life and death are decreed by fate. Everything had to be fought for by oneself. Some of the servants who entered the Chu clan with you became shopkeepers, some became stewards, but most of them died in the caravans, in the battles between the Chu clan and other clans. At this point, Chu Xiu's tone became deep and serene. Future wealth, these are all things you have to fight for with your life. In the past, you didn't even have the chance to fight for your life. Now, I'll give you a chance. Go to the Shangmang Mountain outside Ingot Town and find the bandit leader there. Help me pass on a message. If you succeed, the 100 taels of silver is yours. In the future you, Gao Bei, will be my confidant. As he said this, Chu Xiu directly placed 100 taels of silver on the table and said indifferently, based on your monthly salary in the Chu clan, even if you don't eat or drink, how many taels of silver can you save in a year? I still remember that your parents died, but you still have a young brother who was entrusted to your uncle's family. He should be an adult by now, right? If you want to find a wife in Tongzhou Prefecture, the price won't be low. A hint of struggle flashed across Gao Bei's face. The Shangmang Mountain outside Ingot Town was not a good place. It was a barren mountain with no main roads, but it was filled with bandits, all of whom would kill at the slightest disagreement. Now, the second young master actually wanted him to find them? However, he could not refuse the price that Chu Xiu had offered. He was an honest man, but it was precisely because of this that he could not see any hope of making a name for himself. Now that Chu Xiu had placed an opportunity in front of him, even if there was the risk of losing his life, Gao Bei could not bear to give it up. In the end, he gritted his teeth and took the 100 taels of silver in his hand. If it was the old Chu Xiu, Gao Bei would definitely not have agreed. However, after seeing Chu Xiu's ruthless side today, he was both shocked and respectful, and did not dare to refuse. Chu Xiu nodded in satisfaction. He called Gao Bei over, whispered a few words to him, and had him set off that very night. Watching Gao Bei's departing figure, Chu Xiu's eyes flashed. He was not afraid that Gao Bei would just take the money and leave. He could afford to lose 100 taels of silver. After all, he was the second young master of the Chu clan, the steward of the Nanshan mining area. Every month, the Chu clan paid him several hundred taels of silver. Moreover, he was sure that Gao Bei would not dare. He still had a younger brother in Tongzhou Prefecture, who had been raised by him since he was a child. His younger brother was like his own son. If he dared to run away, the Chu clan was not a kind person. The saying that one should not bring trouble to one's family was simply a joke. The next morning, when Chu Xiu and the others set off, Yu did not see Gao Bei. She could not help but ask in confusion, "Young master, where is Gao Bei?" Chu Xiu said casually, "Gao Bei will return to Tongzhou Prefecture first, and prepare to tell the clan that we are about to arrive." Yu did not suspect anything. After all, Chu Xiu was the second young master of the Chu clan. Before returning to the clan, he indeed had to report his location. However, Yu laughed coldly in her heart. This time, whether or not you can successfully return to Tongzhou Prefecture is still an unknown. The carriage walked on the small path of Shangmang Mountain with difficulty. Compared to the main road, Shangmang Mountain was indeed much closer, and could save many days of time. However, there were countless bandits here. Some caravans with strong guards were fine, but when they met a single traveling caravan or a slightly weaker caravan, those bandits would usually kill them and rob them. Their methods were extremely ruthless. Inside the carriage, perhaps knowing that things were about to start, Yuer's face carried a trace of unnatural expression. At this time, Chu Xiu, who had been resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes, giving Yu a big fright. "You? Do you think we will encounter bandits?" Chu Xiu asked with a calm expression. Yu forced out a trace of a smile. "Young master, don't talk about such inauspicious things. Moreover, even if we meet bandits, they definitely won't dare to touch you. After all, you are a member of the Chu clan." At this time, Chu Xiu's face suddenly revealed a trace of a smile that was not a smile. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, it can't be avoided. What's going to come will come. Moreover, sometimes natural disasters are not scary, but man-made disasters are. Before Yu could say anything, a wave of battle cries came from outside. As Chu Xiu got off the carriage, he said, "Look, aren't man-made disasters coming now?" Chapter 5. Outside the carriage, over 100 fierce-looking bandits had already surrounded it. The dozen or so subordinates of Chu Xiu all had looks of fear and despair on their faces. They were all ordinary servants of the Chu clan. They knew some martial arts and had barely reached the body-tempering realm. It was already difficult for them to face these experienced bandits alone, let alone over 100 of them. Chu Xiu alighted from the carriage and said calmly, "If you gentlemen want to rob me, I still have a few thousand taels of silver here. If you want it, feel free to take it. As for the rest, you've seen it for yourself. I'm not a merchant caravan, and I don't have anything good here." The leader of the bandits was a huge man with disheveled hair. He held a sinister-looking golden tiger head saber in his hand. The broad saber was dragged on the ground, and the bronze tiger head engraved on the hilt was stained with blood. It was clear that this saber had been stained with a lot of blood. A few thousand taels of silver is not a small amount, but it's a pity that your life is worth more than that. Brat, tell me, how do you want to die? Chu Xiu looked at the bandit leader and said calmly, "It's all about buying one's life with money. Since someone wants to buy my life, I can naturally buy my own life with money. You know who I am. If you step aside now, you can ask for as much money as you want in the future." The bandit leader dragged his saber over and laughed. "Everyone says that the Chu clan's second son is a good-for-nothing, but it seems like he's quite courageous. It's a pity that you're too late. Even though I am a bandit, I'm still a man of my word. You can go on your way in peace." Chu Xiu shook his head and sighed. "It's all money anyway. Since I can't buy my own life, I can only buy yours." The bandit leader's face darkened, but before he could say anything, Chu Xiu charged at him at high speed, as if he was going to capture the leader first. "You're courting death." The bandit leader's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. He slashed out with the golden tiger head saber in his hand. The saber's momentum was overbearing, and the wind howled furiously. He was a martial artist from an unorthodox background. He had only learned some superficial external techniques to train his muscles and bones. He did not even know any proper saber techniques. However, he was born with great strength. A heavy weapon like the tiger head seizing the golden saber was like a toy to him. With a sweep of the saber, even if someone was wearing armor, they would still be cut in half. Although they were both in the body-tempering realm, the gap between martial artists of the same rank was still quite big. Previously, that Li Tong was also in the body-tempering realm, and he was even a collateral relative of the Li clan. He also cultivated the Li clan's internal energy, but in the end, his combat experience was very weak. On the other hand, this bandit leader didn't have the slightest bit of internal energy on him, but his attacks were decisive and ruthless. If Li Tong were to fight with him, it was very likely that he would be chopped off with a single slash. However, Chu Xiu was not Li Tong. In the face of this powerful and heavy blade, Chu Xiu was incomparably calm. His strength was inferior to this bandit leader. In the face of that powerful and heavy tiger head seizing golden blade, he might not even be able to block a single blade. Therefore, when the broadsword chopped toward him, he suddenly stopped. The genuine qi of the Xiantian skill flowed in his body. Although there was only a thin trace of it, it was better than nothing. At least, Chu Xiu had only practiced for a few days, but the total amount of his genuine qi was greater than that of the vast qi cultivation method that he had practiced for several years. With a punch, Chu Xiu's fist landed on the broad blade, causing the tiger head snatch golden saber to tilt slightly, narrowly missing Chu Xiu. The bandit leader's eyes revealed a touch of astonishment. It seemed that he didn't expect that this good-for-nothing young master would actually be able to dodge his blade. However, the bandit leader directly exerted force on his wrist, changing the slash into a sweep, chopping toward Chu Xiu's waist. However, Chu Xiu took the opportunity to roll, and although he seemed to be in a sorry state, he was still able to dodge the sweep. Moreover, although the bandit leader attacked fiercely, and Chu Xiu also dodged in an incomparably sorry state, in fact, Chu Xiu didn't suffer too much damage. After a dozen consecutive moves, the bandit leader was already somewhat anxious. It wasn't that he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to kill Chu Xiu, but rather that he wouldn't be able to keep his face. In the face of so many of his subordinates, the result was that he couldn't even deal with a good-for-nothing young master. Didn't this make him look even more useless than a good-for-nothing? His heart was in a mess, and the movements of his hands were somewhat messed up. He was completely attacking crazily, and had already given up on his own defense. At this moment, A glimmer of light appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes. After dodging a blade, his figure directly lowered, and he suddenly got close to the bandit leader. A flash of silver light shone from his sleeve, and directly slashed toward the bandit leader's neck. The swift blade was unsheathed, azure dragon in the sleeve. The bandit leader could be considered a veteran of hundreds of battles. The moment he saw the silver blade light, he instantly felt his scalp go numb, and an extremely strong sense of danger came over him. He forcefully twisted his body, and retreated, avoiding this sure-kill blade. However, who would have thought that Chu Xiu's blade momentum would change, twisting like a swimming dragon and slashing down. The blade slashed down on the bandit leader's shoulder, and almost chopped off one of his arms. The bandit leader covered his bleeding arm and retreated. His eyes revealed a look of horror. If he hadn't dodged that blade fast enough, just that blade would have taken his life. Chu Xiu held the short blade in his hand and stood still. He didn't feel anything. The time he had obtained the azure dragon in the sleeve was too short, and he lacked practice. If he had a few more days to familiarize himself with it, then the bandit leader definitely wouldn't have been able to dodge his blade. The bandit leader's eyes revealed a touch of ferocity, and he said, "Kill! Let's go together and kill all of them for me." As soon as the word kill came out, a shout of kill was already heard. However, it wasn't from the bandit leader's side, but another group of people. There were only a few dozen people in that group, and their numbers were only half of the bandit leaders. However, each of their attacks were extremely ruthless, and they cut down a group of people. One of them, a man in his 30s, was their leader. His face was sallow, and although he wasn't short, he was very skinny. However, he was dragging a heavy sword in his hand, which didn't match his body shape at all. At this time, Gao Bei came out of nowhere and came to Chu Xiu's side. He said cautiously, "Young master, I'm not late, am I?" Chu Xiu stared at the battlefield and said casually, "Not bad, just in time." Although Chu Xiu had just started on the path of martial arts, he was, after all, from a martial arts family. He was more knowledgeable than some of the unorthodox martial artists. Chu Xiu could tell from the yellow-faced man's footsteps that this person was definitely different from the unorthodox bandit leader. This person was definitely a martial artist with an authentic martial arts heritage. At this time, when the bandit leader saw this scene, he couldn't help but shout angrily, "Ma Qua! What the F***ck do you want?" Ma Qua grinned coldly and said, "What do I want? Of course I want to F***ck you. Third brother Lien, it's not the first time that you've stolen my business because you're a veteran in Shangmang Mountain. This time, I'll send you to hell." As soon as he finished speaking, Ma Qua's giant sword came crashing down. From the steps to dragging the sword to lifting the sword to the slash, each of these movements exerted his strength to the extreme. It was just an ordinary vertical slash, but he was able to exert 30% of his strength. He was much stronger than the unorthodox bandit leader. As the sword fell, the bandit leader couldn't hold his sword with both hands because his shoulder was injured by Chu Xiu. The tiger head snatch golden sword was sent flying. He wanted to escape, but Ma Qua was extremely agile. He caught up with the bandit leader and cut him in half at the waist. Ma Qua shook off the blood on his sword and turned back to smile at Chu Xiu. Gao Bei, who was standing beside him, was already frightened by the scene of Ma Qua cutting the bandit leader in half. Seeing this smile, he immediately shivered. Chu Xiu just cupped his hands at Ma Qua and said, "Thank you for your help this time, hero." Ma Qua walked over with his heavy sword and grinned. "Kid, aren't you afraid that I'll kill you?" Chu Xiu spread out his hands and said, "Chief Ma, you should know who I am. You've seen the conditions I promised you. If you kill me, you'll get a few thousand taels of silver at most. But if you don't kill me, you'll get all kinds of refined ores. At least, you'll be able to get your subordinates to trade for all the scrap metal." Yuer had encouraged Chu Xiu to go to Yuanbao town. From that moment, Chu Xiu could guess that his second mother was ruthless enough. Even a bastard like him, who had almost no chance of inheriting the position of the clan head, was merciless. It was most likely that she didn't want him to return to the Chu clan. That was why Chu Xiu had asked Gao Bei to make a trip to Shangshao Mountain. If his second mother could spend money to get the bandits to kill him, then Chu Xiu could get the bandits to protect him. After all, it was a transaction that required money. However, Chu Xiu didn't have much silver on him, so he promised the bandits some refined ores. These were the special products of the Chu clan in the Nanshan mining area. They were also the only power that Chu Xiao had right now. Ma Kuo asked suspiciously, "Are you sure you're not lying to me? As far as I know, the refined ores that your Chu clan mined are all limited. Are you really willing to give them to me?" As a bandit, he naturally needed equipment. He didn't lack weapons, but he only had swords forged by ordinary blacksmiths. The refined ores produced by the Chu clan's Nanshan mine were the true treasures, and were used to forge sharp blades. Ma Kuo had made his move this time, not only because the people who came to kill Chu Xiao were his old enemies, but also because Chu Xiao's offer was very tempting. Chu Xiao said calmly, "Chief Ma, you should know why these people came to kill me today. There are people in the Chu clan who want me dead. Why would I care about the Chu clan's resources?" As he spoke, Chu Xiao took out a piece of paper and handed it to Ma Kuo. "This is my warrant. Send someone to the Nanshan mining area with it, and you can get a batch of refined ores at a low price. Of course you have to be fast. I'm still in charge of the Nanshan mining area now, but I don't know when I will be." After getting the document, Ma Kuo nodded in satisfaction. "You big clans always do a lot of bullshit tea. But you're very straightforward. If you have something like this in the future, you can always come to me. Anyway, I'm still in charge of the Nanshan mining area, but I don't know when I'll be the one in charge." After saying this, Ma Kuo dragged his giant sword and called back the people who were still chasing after the bandits. Then he left. Chu Xiao looked at Ma Kuo's back and pondered. Qi Lian? Bandits? Bandits who had inherited martial arts? A moment later, Chu Xiao suddenly thought of something. He seemed to have figured out the identity of the other party. That brat Gao Bei's luck was pretty good. He had asked him to randomly invite a bunch of bandits, and he actually managed to invite someone with a strong background. After Ma Kuo and the others left, Chu Xiao turned his attention to the carriage. A creepy smile appeared on his face. Chapter 6. Inside the carriage, Yu'er was trembling. She could not understand why the two madams had made such an unexpected change after everything had been arranged. Chu Xiao was famous for being a good-for-nothing in the Chu family. His talent in martial arts was not considered strong, but now he could easily injure the fiendish bandit leader. And the group of people who came later, why did they come to help Chu Xiao? Yu'er could not understand no matter how she thought about it. At this moment, the carriage door was suddenly lifted. Seeing Chu Xiao board the carriage, Yu'er immediately put on a delicate and pitiful look. "Young master, were the bandits all repelled?" Chu Xiao placed his hand on Yu'er's face, caressing her smooth and delicate face. Of course they were all repelled. Just as Yu'er heaved a sigh of relief, Chu Xiao's hand slid down from Yu'er's face to her neck, and slowly exerted force. Chu Xiao moved his face closer to Yu'er's, and said indifferently, "The bandits were repelled, and I did not die. Are you disappointed?" Looking at the familiar yet unfamiliar face that was so close to her, Yu'er forced out a smile and said, "Young master must be joking. It is a good thing that the bandits were repelled. How could this servant be disappointed?" Chu Xiao sneered, and the hand that was strangling Yu'er's neck tightened. Only when the other party's face was completely red, and she struggled to spit out a word, did Chu Xiao let go and said coldly, "Do you really think I'm an idiot? Tell me, how much silver did my good second mother spend to hire these bandits?" Yu'er's face revealed a look of fear, and she said while trembling, Young master, you know everything?" Feeling Chu Xiao's hand begin to tighten again, Yu'er hurriedly said, "I'll speak. Young master, I'll tell you everything. Second madam spent 10,000 taels of silver to hire these bandits." Chu Xiao sneered and said, 10,000 taels of silver, what a huge sum. Does my second mother hate me so much that she's willing to spend 10,000 taels of silver to kill me just to prevent me from returning to the Chu clan? Yu'er said carefully, "Second madam said that young master has always been stubbornly standing on the side of the eldest young master. Sooner or later, it will be a bad thing. In addition, she has recently won over the fourth young master. It is just the right time to get rid of young master to prevent future troubles." Chu Xiao was speechless when he heard this. The previous Chu Xiao had indeed done a lot of stupid things with his current body. The head of the Chu clan, Chu Zongguang, had 4 sons. Even if Chu Xiao was the son of a concubine, and the chances of him inheriting the position of clan head were very small, there was still a chance. Why did he have to make a stand so early? It was precisely because he chose a side too early that the eldest son of the Chu clan, Chu Kai, and his aunt did not take him seriously. When he was framed by the third son of the Chu clan, Chu Shang, they found it troublesome and did not interfere. If he did not choose a side, then what awaited him was to be roped in. Just like the fourth prince of the Chu clan, Chu Shang. Although he was young, his second mother had already paid a huge price to win him over. How could he be like him, who was paid a huge price to be killed? The previous Chu Xiao had long given up fighting for the position of clan head. Perhaps it was out of despair, or perhaps he really did not have any ambition. But now, Chu Xiao was a little interested in this position. In fact, Chu Xiao did not care too much about the position of clan head of a small clan. After all, according to the original plot, he was going to become the leader of an evil sect that would bring disaster to the world. But the problem was that that was the original plot, and the current Chu Xiao was the Chu Xiao who had been reborn. Only the heavens knew how things would develop, so he had to eat one bite at a time, and walk one step at a time. First, he had to obtain the position of successor to the Chu clan head. Since ancient times, the poor were scholars, and the rich were martial artists. From tempering one's muscles and bones to condensing one's qi and blood, which did not require a large amount of resources and time. As the successor to the Chu clan head, not all of the Chu clan's resources would be his, but at least half of it would be his. This would allow Chu Xiao to improve faster on the path of martial arts. Chu Xiao looked at Yu Er and said indifferently, "My second mother actually chose to hire bandits to kill me. Is she not afraid of being discovered by the Chu clan? Do you have any evidence of her colluding with bandits?" Since Chu Xiao had chosen to fight for the position of successor, his three brothers were all obstacles. If he could obtain evidence now, he could eliminate one of them first. Yu Er thought for a moment and said, "There is no evidence." Second Madam directly sent one of her trusted subordinates to find the bandits. Those bandits only knew that the people who came to find them were from the Chu clan, and didn't even know who they were. There is no evidence left on paper. After saying this, Yu Er revealed a pitiful expression and looked at Chu Xiao. "Young master, I've said everything I need to say. Can you spare my life?" Chu Xiao smiled and said, "Don't worry, I don't kill women." When Yu Er heard this, a relieved smile appeared on her face. However, Chu Xiao suddenly exerted force and directly crushed her neck. Looking at Yu Er, who was no longer breathing and still had a puzzled look in her eyes, Chu Xiao said indifferently, "I lied to you. You even believed this. You're so naive. Yet you still followed others and became a spy?" Chu Xiao dragged Yu Er's corpse and threw it out of the carriage. He ordered Gao Bei, "Bury her." Gao Bei and the other servants shuddered, but no one said anything. Yu Er was a servant bought by the Chu clan. Her life belonged to the Chu clan. Of course they could play with her and kill her if they wanted to. Moreover, there was clearly something wrong with the second young master these 2 days. The degree of his viciousness seemed to have changed. They didn't dare to say anything. 7 days later, Chu Xiao finally walked out of Shangmang Mountain. At the end of the official road, a bustling prefecture appeared in front of Chu Xiao. This was the Tong Prefecture where the Chu clan was located. It was one of the few big prefectures in Wei Prefecture. Speaking of which, the history of Wei Prefecture was quite interesting. Wei Prefecture was originally a small country, the Wei Kingdom. It was located between northern Yan and eastern Qi, one of the 3 great countries in the world. It had once helped the Qi Kingdom attack the Yan Kingdom, but was eventually destroyed by the Yan Kingdom. The Yan Kingdom held a grudge against the Wei Kingdom for attacking the Yan Kingdom, so they implemented a high-handed policy in Wei County, causing the people of Wei County and the people in the martial arts world to rebel. Even the general of the Yan Kingdom, Fong Longquan, who was guarding Wei County, was seriously injured by a mysterious person and lost one of his arms. For a while, Wei County was in chaos, forcing the Yan Kingdom, who did not dare to massacre the city, to retreat temporarily. In the end, the Yan Kingdom came to an agreement with Wei Prefecture. They wouldn't station troops in Wei Prefecture, but would send civil officials to manage it. Therefore, Wei Prefecture was under the jurisdiction of the Yan Kingdom in name, and taxes were also handed over to the Yan Kingdom. However, in reality it was its own territory. Of course, these major events in the imperial court had nothing to do with a small clan like the Chu clan. Without the jurisdiction of the imperial court, The martial artists of Wei Prefecture were very free. Some of the martial artists were also living very comfortably. The Chu clan was one of the 3 great clans of the Tong Prefecture. There was a street in the south of the city that belonged to the Chu clan. The carriage stopped in front of the Chu clan's gate. As soon as Chu Xiao got off the carriage, he saw the gate open. A middle-aged lady in her 40s, dressed elegantly, walked out with a group of servant girls. When she saw Chu Xiao standing in front of the carriage, her expression changed slightly. Seeing the person in front of him, Chu Xiao had a faint smile on his face. He cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, second mother. I haven't seen you for a year, but second mother has become younger." The lady in front of him was the mother of the Chu clan's 3rd son, Chu Shang. She was the second madam of the Chu clan. Although it was Chu Shang who had caused him to be demoted to the mines, it was most likely the second madam who had come up with the idea. Moreover, this second madam's background was not simple. She was the only daughter of the Tong Prefecture's mountain-splitting martial arts school's master, gold-splitting hand, Ding Kaishan. Ding Kaishan was the local tyrant of the Tong Prefecture. Although he had not reached the Xiantian realm, he was still at the peak of the blood condensation realm. He was very popular in all aspects of the Tong Prefecture. 20 years ago, when the Chu clan had just moved to the Tong Prefecture, it was precisely because Chu Xiao's father, Chu Zongguang, had married Ding Kaishan's daughter that they were able to settle down in the Tong Prefecture so quickly. The second madam looked at the smiling Chu Xiao in front of her and couldn't help but frown. Everything had clearly been arranged, so how had Chu Xiao returned alive? Could it be that stupid girl Yu, or had messed things up? Had Chu Xiao not taken the small path to Ingot Town? The second madam looked around but didn't see Yu, She couldn't help but ask, "Where's your servant girl Yu, Chu Xiao had a look of pity on his face as he shook his head. Yuer's body was too weak, and she was accidentally played to death by me. I heard that second mother still has quite a few pretty maids. Why don't you give me another one?" As he spoke, Chu Xiao's gaze swept unscrupulously towards the maids behind the second madam. Immediately, the faces of the maids changed. The second madam's expression immediately changed. Yuer was dead? Then did he know that she had arranged for the bandits to kill Chu Xiao? Moreover, after not seeing him for more than a year, she felt that the Chu Xiao in front of her was a completely different person. A year ago, he wouldn't have dared to speak to her like this. With a cold snort, the second madam said indifferently, "Since you're back, then go in. Master and the others are all waiting for you." Chu Xiao raised his eyebrows. He had Gao Bei bring the others to rest first, while he followed the second madam into the Chu clan's meeting hall. Chapter 7. The Chu family's mansion was magnificent. Although it could not be compared to the Shen family, which had been rooted in the Tongzhou prefecture for hundreds of years, the Chu family was still a big family in the Tongzhou prefecture. Chu Xiao followed the second madam to the Chu family's meeting hall. At this time, the hall was already full of people. At the head of the hall sat a tall middle-aged man with a square face. He wore a brocade robe and had his eyes closed. This middle-aged man was Chu Xiao's father, the Chu family's patriarch, Chu Zongguang. Chu Zongguang's experience could be considered legendary. More than 20 years ago, he brought dozens of Chu family members to the Tongzhou prefecture and established a foothold in the Tongzhou prefecture from scratch. Now the Chu family had become one of the 3 big families in the Tongzhou prefecture, even stronger than the Li family that had been rooted in the Tongzhou prefecture for hundreds of years. However, in Chu Xiao's memory, his father could be said to be extremely cold. He had not seen his father more than a few times since he was a child. Of course, Chu Zongguang was not only cold to him, but also to his other sons. The only one who was slightly better was the 4th prince of the Chu family, Chu Shang, who was also Chu Zongguang's youngest son. In the past, Chu Xiao did not think so much, but now that he had been reborn, Chu Xiao felt that his father was a bit strange. Chu Zongguang's strength was at the innate realm. He had already crossed the body tempering and blood condensation realms. He had reached the realm where the qi, blood, muscles, and bones in his body were completely integrated, without any impurities, like a newborn baby. Chu Zongguang was actually in his 50s, but he looked even younger than the second madam who was in her 40s. Warriors at the innate realm were considered to have reached a higher level in martial arts. In the outside world, they were not unknown people, but in the Tongzhou prefecture, they were real experts. However, in Chu Xiao's memories, His father had always been in closed-door training, to the point where he didn't even care about the internal affairs of the Chu family. He only expressed his opinions on some major matters. If it wasn't for the fact that he was the strongest in the Chu family, the Chu family's authority would have fallen. In fact, it was not a big deal that they liked to go into closed-door training. After all, the Chu family was considered a martial arts family. Even though they were the smallest in the martial arts world, strength was everything. Rather than wasting effort to curry favor, it was better to use strength to suppress others. But the problem was that Chu Zongguang had cultivated so hard for more than 20 years, but his strength did not seem to have changed much. It was simply a waste of time. Without talent and comprehension, no matter how hard he cultivated, he would not become a master. Below Chu Zongguang were 5 old men. Looking at their appearances, even the youngest was over 60 years old. These old men were all elders of the Chu clan and were also Chu Zongguang's elders. They all held some power in the Chu clan. There were also some people standing beside these elders. These were the stewards and stewards of the Chu clan. Some were even the descendants of these elders. They also held a portion of the Chu clan's authority. In addition to these elders and stewards, sitting on both sides were Chu Zongguang's wives and Chu Xiu's brothers. It was said that the Chu family's first wife came from a large family. Before Chu Zongguang had come to the Tong prefecture, she had been married to Chu Zongguang. The Chu family's eldest brother, Chu Kai, had a tall figure. He always had a trace of arrogance on his face. He was the strongest of the 4 Chu family brothers, having already reached blood condensation. As for the Chu family's third brother, Chu Shang, he was a bit skinny. He always had a warm smile on his face. But when he looked at Chu Xiu, his gaze contained a trace of ruthlessness. Obviously, he had not expected Chu Xiu to return alive. The Chu family's third wife was a graceful woman in her 30s. She was the one Chu Zongguang loved the most. The Chu family's fourth prince, Chu Shang, was only 16 this year. He was handsome, and it was said that he looked very similar to Chu Zongguang when he was young. So he was also the one Chu Zongguang loved the most. The Chu family had 4 sons, but they only had 3 wives. Chu Xiu's mother was only a concubine. Of course she couldn't be considered a proper wife. Chu Xiu walked in and bowed to everyone in the meeting hall. Greetings, father, great-granduncle, third granduncle, 7th granduncle, 8th granduncle, 9th granduncle, first mother, second mother, third mother. Chu Zongguang nodded lightly. You've returned. Go sit. As his father, he had spoken. As for Chu Xiu's 5 uncles, they didn't even bat an eyelid. They were 2 generations older than Chu Xiu. Of course they wouldn't care about a junior like him. Most importantly, they all knew just what kind of position Chu Xiu had within the Chu family. Chu Zongguang coughed and said, Our Chu family has been in the Tongzhou prefecture for more than 20 years. Now we can be considered to have taken root here. In recent years, the children have all grown up, and several uncles have been urging us. It is time for our Chu family to decide on a successor. At this time, the first madam of the Chu family suddenly said, What else? Chu Kai is the eldest son of the Chu family. He is also the strongest. If we don't let him be the successor, who else can? Hearing this, the second madam of the Chu family immediately sneered. Eldest sister, what you said is wrong. Why can the eldest son inherit the position of the patriarch? Our Chu family is not the royal family. Only the eldest son can inherit. Look at the other martial arts families. The position of the patriarch has always been taken by the strongest. A cold light flashed in the first madam's eyes. Are you saying that my son is not as good as your son? The second madam said unhurriedly, I didn't say that. I only know that we are all women. In these important matters, it is still the master who makes the decisions. Saying this, the second madam turned her gaze to the third madam. Younger sister, don't you think so? The third madam just smiled and said softly, I am just a woman. Of course I don't understand these things. Whatever the master says is the truth. Hearing this, the first madam's face suddenly turned livid. Although the third madam didn't say it explicitly, from her words, it was obvious that she was on the second madam's side. Chu Zongguang slammed the table and shouted, Enough! Seeing Chu Zongguang's anger, the women stopped talking. Chu Zongguang rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. He hated dealing with this kind of mess the most. Don't say any more. Of course, we need to carefully consider the successor. Today, all the uncles are here, so I will set the rules. In this 1 year, Chu Kai, Chu Xiao, Chu Shang, and Chu Shang, each of you will hold a part of the family's business in your hands. Whoever manages the family's business the best will be the successor. Our Chu family is only so big, and our business is only so small. Whoever makes the most progress can be seen at a glance. Speaking up to here, Chu Zongguang looked at the youngest Chu Shang and said, although my Chu clan is a martial arts family, because of your age, your strength will not be examined. Only your ability will be examined. Do you agree? As soon as these words came out, the first madam and the eldest Chu family Chu Kai's expression immediately became gloomy. Chu Zongguang was obviously siding with the youngest Chu Shang. With one sentence, he had taken away Chu Kai's greatest advantage. The second madam smiled and said, of course I agree with the master's words. The third madam also followed up, this servant naturally also agrees. Only the first madam's face was ashen. She coldly snorted and said, I disagree. Our Chu family is a martial arts family, yet we don't test strength when choosing the successor. This is simply a joke. Chu Xiao narrowed his eyes as he looked at the people present. Through this conversation, he had more or less grasped the personalities of the people present. The elders of the Chu family were just decorations. They had their own little schemes, but they didn't dare to disobey Chu Zongguang's will. His eldest brother and the first madam were of the same character. They were very arrogant and didn't put anyone in their eyes. It was said that the first madam came from a great family. Now it seemed that this was true. She actually dared to directly challenge Chu Zongguang. However, doing this was also very stupid. Even if her family background was great, this was not her home. This was the Tongzhou prefecture, the Chu family. She dared to contradict Chu Zongguang like this, which would only make Chu Zongguang hate her even more. There was no need to mention the second madam. She was vicious and merciless. Her son Chu Xiao's cultivation was much weaker than his mother's. When he came in, Chu Xiao could feel killing intent from his body. Finally, the third madam was a smart person. After the first madam and second madam grew old, she was the only one Chu Zongguang liked. She also appeared harmless, but she didn't fight. Chu Zongguang liked Chu Shang the most. As for Chu Zongguang himself, Chu Xiao could feel that his father was someone who hated trouble. Even if he kept saying that choosing the successor was a very important matter, he still didn't seem to care about it. This made Chu Xiao feel a little strange. Could it be that his father had really gone into seclusion? How could he be so perfunctory about such an important matter? At this moment the Chu family's first madam suddenly said, Chu Xiao, although you are a bastard, you are still the successor to our Chu family. What do you think about the matter master spoke of? Only now did everyone seem to notice Chu Xiao. The second madam immediately frowned. She was afraid that this would happen. Although she had won over the third madam and Chu Shang, that idiot Chu Xiao had always been standing on the side of the first madam and Chu Kai. The first madam was also aware of this. She proudly raised her eyebrows at the second madam. It was 2 against 2. If Chu Zongguang brazenly sided with Chu Shang, it would be a little unreasonable. But who would have thought that Chu Xiao would actually smile at this moment? He cupped his hands at Chu Zongguang and said, how could this child dare to disagree with Lord Father's decision? Of course, this child will do whatever Lord Father says. As soon as these words left his mouth, everyone present was stunned. The first madam and Chu Kai looked at Chu Xiao in disbelief, especially Chu Kai. He clearly remembered that this brat used to follow behind him like a follower. Now, he actually dared to oppose him? The second madam furrowed her brows. She couldn't guess what Chu Xiao was thinking. She was now sure that Chu Xiao should know about her plot to kill him. But even if he knew about it, he still stood on her side. What was Chu Xiao trying to do? In fact, Chu Xiao's intention was very simple. He also wanted to fight for the position of patriarch. If he stood on the first madam's side, then what was the point of fighting? In the past, Chu Xiao didn't want to fight, but now Chu Xiao didn't want to fight for the position of patriarch. The Chu family's assets couldn't be taken advantage of by his useless brothers, right? At this moment, even Chu Zongguang looked at Chu Xiao in surprise. He felt that this son of his, whom he had always neglected, seemed to be a little different from a year ago. Did the Nanshan mining area train people like this? Chapter 8. Chu Xiu's choice was beyond everyone's expectations, but second madam and third madam both showed a hint of joy. Regardless of why Chu Xiu stood against first madam, they were the ones who benefited, and that was enough. Chu Kai turned to Chu Xiu beside him and said in a low voice, "Chu Xiu, do you know what you're saying? I'll give you another chance. Do you dare say it again?" From the moment Chu Xiu came in until now, Chu Kai had never looked Chu Xiu in the eye. The only time he looked Chu Xiu in the eye was because Chu Xiu stood against him. His attitude was the same as when he faced Chu Xiu in the past, condescending. Chu Xiu glanced at him and said loudly, "Big brother, what do you mean? Is it wrong for me to listen to Lord Father's words? Big brother, you're not the patriarch yet. How can you control so much? When you really become the patriarch of the Chu family, won't you drive us little brothers out of the Chu family to beg for food?" "You!" Chu Kai stood up in anger, but Chu Zongguang's expression suddenly sank, coldly snorting, "Sit down. Look at what you've become. Do you still have the dignity of a big brother? Don't forget, I'm not dead yet. Right now, the Chu family is not choosing a patriarch, but a successor." Although Chu Zongguang was too lazy to care about the Chu family's affairs and wholeheartedly devoted himself to seclusion, he also had a bottom line. Chu Kai had overstepped his boundaries. He certainly couldn't sit idly by. Chu Kai sat down resentfully, and first madam of the Chu family also had an ashen face, not saying a word. Chu Zongguang coughed and said, "All right, this matter is settled. No one is allowed to argue anymore." But at this time, Chu Xiu suddenly stood up and said, "Father, this child still has something to say." Chu Zongguang frowned. "What else do you want?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "Big brother and the others all control part of the family business, but what do I have? Since Lord Father has set the rules for the successor, we can't favor one and discriminate against the other, right?" As soon as these words came out, apart from Chu Zongguang, everyone's complexion changed. Chu Xiu's meaning was very clear. He wanted a part of the family business, and he also wanted to fight for the position of the family successor. At this moment, the second madam finally understood why Chu Xiu was on their side. To be precise, Chu Xiu should be on her side. Chu Kai stared at Chu Xiu with a sneer on his face. This piece of trash wants to fight for the position of the successor of the patriarch? The threat that Chu Xiu posed to him was even less than that of the fourth prince Chu Shang, who was still in his teens. At this time, a middle-aged man standing at the back suddenly said in a slightly sarcastic tone, "Second young master, don't you have the Nanshan mining area in your hands? What business do you still want?" This person was the Chu family's chief steward, surnamed Lu. He was the first madam's elder brother. In the Chu family, the steward and the steward were two different positions. The steward was mainly responsible for some of the Chu family's businesses and properties, while the steward was only responsible for managing some of the Chu family's internal affairs. Several stewards were relatives of the first madam, so even if they didn't know martial arts, they could still hold the position. As soon as Steward Lu spoke, everyone looked at him. Everyone knew that Steward Lu was targeting Chu Xiu. Who told Chu Xiu to oppose the first madam? Although the Nanshan mining area was also a business of the Chu family, the mining area was only so big. No matter how capable a person was, it was impossible to find another one. Guarding the Nanshan mining area was basically no different from giving up on the position of the family's successor. At this time, Chu Xiu stood up and suddenly said to Steward Lu, "Steward Lu, come here, I have something to tell you." Steward Lu was taken aback, but he still walked over and muttered, "If there's anything second young master wants to say, just say it. Are you afraid that I won't be able to hear you from afar?" However, just as he reached Chu Xiu's side, Chu Xiu suddenly attacked without any warning. He punched Steward Lu's abdomen, and the powerful force immediately caused Steward Lu to spit out a mouthful of blood. He clutched his stomach and fell to the ground. This wasn't the end. Chu Xiu expressionlessly kicked Steward Lu again and again. In an instant, Steward Lu's head was covered in blood, and he let out a miserable howl. This was a family meeting. No one expected that Chu Xiu would suddenly attack. By the time everyone reacted, Steward Lu was already on the verge of death from Chu Xiu's trampling. He could only exhale, but not inhale. Second madam and the others looked at Chu Xiu's expressionless appearance and couldn't help but shiver. It wasn't just because of Chu Xiu's ruthlessness, but because the current Chu Xiu was like a completely different person, making them feel extremely uncomfortable. Bang! Chu Zongguang angrily slammed his palm down, and the table next to him was immediately torn apart. Enough! Chu Xiu! What do you want to do? Don't you have any respect for your father by attacking me in public? Seeing Chu Zongguang's anger, Chu Xiu stopped, his eyes faintly flashing a strange light. It seems that he really wasn't in his father's good graces before. Just now, when Chu Kai overstepped his authority in front of him, he only scolded him, but now it was his turn to teach a lesson to a servant. Chu Zongguang was so angry that he directly slammed the table. Chu Xiu slowly cupped his hands towards Chu Zongguang and said, "Father, please calm your anger, I just couldn't control myself for a moment. Since when did a servant have the right to interrupt when the master is speaking? I haven't been back to the Chu family for more than a year. Has the Chu family become so unruly? Forgive me for speaking bluntly, but father, you are usually too kind, so these servants don't know the rules." Chu Xiu coldly glanced at Steward Lu at his feet and said, "If this kind of trash was placed in the Nanshan mining area, I would have already thrown him out to light the sky lanterns. Father is kind, but I, Chu Xiu, am not so easy to deal with." Chu Xiu explained while flattering Chu Zongguang a few words, which made Chu Zongguang's anger dissipate. Although Steward Lu was a relative of the first madam, he was still just a servant. How could he let his son apologize for a servant? Although this was only the son he disliked the most. Moreover, he was in seclusion all year round, so he didn't care much about the family's affairs. This caused the servants to become somewhat unreasonable. Chu Zongguang waved his hand casually and said, "Forget it, remember next time, this is the Chu family, not the Nanshan mining area. If there's anything, we can talk it out. I'll punish you by giving 3 months of your salary to Steward Lu to recover." Chu Xiu immediately cupped his hands and said, "I understand. But father, what should I do about the matter I mentioned before? I can't really guard the Nanshan mining area, can I? Otherwise, what's the point of the heir calling me here?" Chu Zongguang frowned. Although he had never thought of passing the position of the head of the family to this son he didn't really like, he couldn't go too far in front of so many people. At this moment, the first madam spoke up with dissatisfaction. "Master, are we just going to let this matter go? Chu Xiu did this in front of so many people, he didn't even put you in his eyes." Hearing the first madam's words, Chu Zongguang's expression suddenly became gloomy. He snorted coldly and said, "What else do you want me to do? Make him pay with his life for housekeeper Lu's? I've already said that I'll let this matter go. From today onwards, the caravan of the Chu family heading to the Yen Kingdom will be under the management of Chu Xiu. The caravan should be on its way back now. When it reaches the Chu family, you will be in charge." Chu Xiu bowed to Chu Zongguang and said with a smile, "Thank you, Lord Father." When Chu Xiu stood up, he saw the first madam and Chu Kai's ashen faces. Chu Xiu didn't care. These two were a pair of idiots. The first madam was from a large family, but she didn't know her place. This was the Tongzhou prefecture, the Chu family, not her previous family. Going against Chu Zongguang would only make Chu Zongguang hate her more and more. There was also that Chu Kai. He was older than Chu Xiu by 7 or 8 years. Even with such a huge advantage, he had not been able to become the heir to the patriarch position. Now, he had to compete with his younger brothers again. He was simply trash. Chu Zongguang waved his hand and said, "All right, the matter has been settled. You can all go." With Chu Zongguang's departure, the others also left the meeting hall. But before they left, they all looked at Chu Xiu with strange eyes. This was especially true for the second madam and her son. Before, their biggest enemies were the first madam and Chu Xiu. They didn't expect Chu Xiu to change so much in a year. He even had such great ambitions. After leaving the meeting hall, the second madam and Chu Shang returned to their room. Chu Shang couldn't help but ask, "Mother, didn't you arrange for people to get rid of Chu Xiu? How did he come back alive?" The second madam's face was gloomy. "I miscalculated. Who would have thought that after staying in the Nanshan mining area for a year, Chu Xiu would change so much? If I had known earlier, I would have persuaded the master to demote him to another place. The Nanshan mining area is filled with criminals and murderers. Although the environment is harsh, it is enough to train people. After staying there for a year, Chu Xiao seems to have changed into a different person. But Shang, you don't have to worry. Just look at Chu Xiao's performance today. He dared to make a move in front of the master. He is simply arrogant and crazy to the extreme. He was not liked by the master in the first place, and now it is even more so. The Chu family will not choose a madman to be the successor. So you don't have to worry. Among your brothers, Chu Kai has great ambition but little talent. He is arrogant. Chu Xiao acts like a madman and is not liked by the master. That Chu Shang is only a teenager. He is too young. Although the master likes him the most, he is not a threat to you. As long as you become the successor, do you still have to worry about not being able to suppress him? Chu Shang nodded his head as a cold light flashed across his eyes. In his opinion, he was the only one in the Chu family who was worthy of being the future patriarch. Besides being born a few years earlier than him, how was Chu Kai stronger than him? That's right, mother. Father gave a caravan to Chu Xiao today. If I remember correctly, the stewards of that caravan are your people, right? Find an opportunity to trip Chu Xiao up. The second madam's face showed a trace of coldness. Rest assured, mother spent a lot of money to win over the stewards of that caravan. Even if Chu Xiao gets the caravan, I guarantee that he will not be able to command them. Chapter 9. The Chu clan's residence was very large, but the place where Chu Xiao, the son of a concubine, lived wasn't very big. It was just an ordinary courtyard, smaller than the other three brothers. Having fused the memories of 2 lifetimes, Chu Xiao's mind was still a little muddled about the rest, except for some important things. After exiting the meeting hall, he thought for a while before remembering where he was staying. Pushing open the door to his courtyard, he saw Gao Bei waiting inside. When he saw Chu Xiao return, Gao Bei went up to him and said, "Young master, is the meeting over? Would you like to eat something? This lowly one will prepare it for you." Chu Xiao shook his head and said, "There's no need to rush. Where is the clan's dispensary for receiving cultivation resources? I haven't received any cultivation resources for a year, so I should have accumulated quite a bit, right?" Gao Bei's mouth moved, as if he wanted to say something, but he swallowed it back down. Chu Xiao said indifferently, "I know what you want to say. You want to say that I didn't have the qualifications to receive cultivation resources in the past, and even if I go now, they might not be willing to give it to me, right?" Gao Bei smiled awkwardly, not daring to reply. In fact, Chu Xiao also knew what was going on. As a son of a concubine, Chu Xiao had never been valued since he was a child. When it was time for him to cultivate, there were no elders to guide him. When he had already missed the best period for cultivation, the Chu clan randomly sent a guard to teach him martial arts. Every direct descendant of the Chu clan had the qualifications to receive cultivation resources every month. But these things had never fallen into Chu Xiao's hands since he was a child. They had all been taken away by someone else, and that person was the eldest young master of the Chu clan, Chu Kai. Even Chu Xiao didn't dare to complain to Chu Zongguang about this, so the people in the dispensary were even less likely to say anything. As such, they tacitly agreed to give Chu Xiao's share of cultivation resources to Chu Kai. As a result, Chu Kai's current strength was a level higher than that of Chu Xiao and the others. This was due to the contributions of Chu Xiao from the past. Chu Xiao looked straight at Gao Bei and said, "Remember, those are the rules of the past. Now, some rules need to be changed." Gao Bei got goosebumps from Chu Xiao's stare, but he quickly nodded. "Lead the way." The pharmacy of the Chu family was very lively. There was a separate area for the pharmacy. Although the pharmacy was called a pharmacy, it produced 2 types of medicine. One was Jinchuang medicine, which was sold to Jianghu people. After it was made by the pharmacy, it would be sold in the Chu family's shop in Tongzhou Prefecture. There was also the qi replenishing powder, blood coagulation pill, and other elixirs that could assist martial artists in their cultivation. The ingredients for these elixirs were very precious, and some of them didn't even exist in Tongzhou Prefecture. They had to buy them from outside through caravans. The failure rate was also very high, so these elixirs were basically not sold. They were only used by the Chu family's internal members. At this time, Gao Bei brought Chu Xiu into the pharmacy. Some of the servants and stewards of the pharmacy looked at Chu Xiu with a strange look in their eyes. After all, they had never seen this second young master in this place. What was he doing in the pharmacy today? Chu Xiu pushed open the door of a room. Inside sat a steward in his 40s, dressed in brocade. There were several stewards in the pharmacy. The one in front of him was only responsible for distributing cultivation resources to the Chu family's disciples, and was not the chief steward. When he saw someone suddenly push open the door and come in, he subconsciously sat up straight. However, when he saw that the person was Chu Xiu, he immediately leaned back in his chair and asked casually, "So it's the second young master. May I know why the second young master has come to my pharmacy?" At this time, Gao Bei, who was behind Chu Xiu, said with a smile, "Steward Zhou, it's like this. The second young master has come to collect his cultivation resources for this year." Steward Zhou was stunned for a moment, then he sneered and said, "Is the second young master making fun of me? Your cultivation resources have always been the eldest young master's. Why do you need to ask me for it?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Then why do you want to give my cultivation resources to the eldest young master? Do you think it's my order or father's order?" Steward Zhou was stunned. Was there a need for anyone to say something like this? When the eldest young master took your cultivation resources, you didn't even dare to let out a fart. Of course they wouldn't say anything. Now that Chu Xiu actually came to question him, Steward Zhou felt that Chu Xiu was here to cause trouble. However, he didn't care about this second young master, who had never been valued in the family. Steward Zhou directly snorted and said, "If the second young master is unhappy that the eldest young master took your cultivation resources, you can directly ask the eldest young master for them. I'm afraid you're thinking too much if you want to vent your anger on me." A trace of danger appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes. However, at this moment, a person suddenly ran in and slapped Steward Zhou to the ground. The person scolded, "How dare you? How dare you speak to the second young master like this? Do you have any respect for your seniors?" Steward Zhou covered his face and looked at the person in front of him in disbelief. "Head steward, why did you?" "Shut up. You have no right to speak here." The pharmacy's head steward immediately shouted sternly and interrupted him. The pharmacy's head steward was slightly plump. When he turned to face Chu Xiu, his fiendish expression immediately changed to one of incomparable warmth. "My subordinates are insensible. Please forgive them, second young master. The pharmacy has stored all your cultivation resources for you. Not a single portion will be missing. Also, the pill refiners have recently refined a batch of blood coagulation pills of excellent quality. I've also given you a bottle. I'll pack it up for you now." As he spoke, the pharmacy's head steward immediately ordered his men to pack up the items and handed them over to Chu Xiu respectfully. He then personally sent them out. Turning around and closing the door, the head steward looked at Steward Zhou, who was still covering his face in a daze. He sighed and said, "I slapped you just now for your own good. If I hadn't slapped you, you would have been in deep trouble today." There were so many stewards in the pharmacy and Steward Zhou was his trusted aide. That was why Steward Zhou couldn't believe that the head steward had slapped him without a second word. Of course, Steward Zhou didn't dare to complain. He only asked curiously, "Head steward, why were you so polite to that Chu second young master?" Actually, Steward Zhou wanted to tell him to lower his head. Just now, the head steward's attitude could be considered as servile. The head steward shook his head and said, "Remember, in the future, be more polite to the second young master. You must be even more polite than the other three young masters. This second young master is no longer the second young master of the past." As he spoke, the head steward told him about what had happened in the Chu family's conference hall. The head steward was in charge of the pharmacy and could be considered as one of the Chu family's stewards. He had been standing in the conference hall and had witnessed the entire process. Previously, Chu Xiu had acted so crazily that he had almost beaten Steward Lu to death in front of everyone. That attitude made him feel a chill run down his spine. As for Steward Zhou, his body trembled even more after he heard the story. There was a difference in status between a steward and a steward. He belonged to the lowest rank, while Steward Lu, as the head steward of the Chu family, was the highest rank. Steward Zhou had to bow his head in respect when he saw Steward Lu. In the end, even Steward Lu was almost crippled by this second young master. Steward Zhou actually dared to be so rude to him. Steward Zhou felt that he was simply courting death. Steward Zhou hurriedly wept tears of gratitude to the head steward. If it wasn't for you, this lowly one would have been in deep trouble. The head steward sighed and said, "Remember, even though we are all stewards of the Chu family, we are still servants. If we forget our identities, the consequences will be very serious." Just like Steward Liu, he forgot his identity. In the end, not only will he be disgraced, he will also have to lie in bed for a few months. On the way back to his courtyard, Gao Bei couldn't help but say to Chu Xiao, "Young master, you were really impressive just now. Even the head steward of the pharmacy was so courteous to you." Courteous? Chu Xiao shook his head and said, "It wasn't courteous, it was reverence. If you can't be good enough to make everyone respect you, then you can only be evil enough to make everyone fear you." Gao Bei shook his head in confusion and said, "I don't understand." Chu Xiao pushed open the courtyard's gate and said, "Of course you don't understand. If you did, you wouldn't have been unable to become a steward after so many years." Looking at the slightly empty courtyard, Chu Xiao said to Gao Bei, "Go find some wooden stakes to erect in the courtyard." "Young master, what do you need wooden stakes for?" Chu Xiao's eyes revealed a hint of brilliance and said, "To practice the saber. If one wanted to advance on the path of martial arts, they needed talent, perseverance, fortuitous encounters, and comprehension. There was no difference between them, but to reach the peak, none of them could be lacking. For the current Chu Xiao, his talent could only be considered average. As for his comprehension, he didn't know much about it. As for fortuitous encounters, Chu Xiao knew quite a bit, but he didn't have the strength to snatch them. So now, Chu Xiao could only work on his perseverance. Gao Bei went to prepare the wooden stakes. Seeing that the sky was getting dark, he also got someone to send dinner over. Although Gao Bei's ability was average, he was conscientious and meticulous when doing things. Returning to his room, Chu Xiao took out the medicinal pills he received from the pharmacy. Among them, there were 2 packets of qi replenishing powder a month, which should be 24 packets a year. However, the head steward of the pharmacy gave him 30 packets. There was also the blood condensation pill, 3 pills a year, but Chu Xiao had 10 pills in this bottle, and their quality was also high. The preparation of this qi replenishing powder was relatively simple. He just needed to grind some herbs into powder according to a certain ratio and mix them together. It could replenish qi and strengthen the body, and assist in cultivation. However, there were several herbs that were more precious, and they couldn't be bought in Tongzhou Prefecture. As for the blood condensation pill, as the name suggested, it was used to help martial artists condense the body's qi and blood to break through to the blood condensation realm. It needed a special alchemist to refine it. The process was complicated, and there was a chance of failure. Even the Chu family only dared to refine it once a month. Taking out a packet of qi replenishing powder, he mixed it with water and swallowed it. After a while, Chu Xiao felt a heat rising from his body. He quickly began to operate the Xiantian skill to refine this medicinal power. Chapter 10. The cultivation methods of Taoism emphasized the most on the foundation. Although the Xiantian skill, a secret manual of Chuanjin sect, did not have any moves in actual combat, it could make Chu Xiao's foundation extremely solid, and even make up for his poor foundation when he was young. The extraordinary meridians flowed by themselves, and the 8 meridians were all opened. A trace of true qi from the Xiantian skill wandered in Chu Xiao's meridians. High-grade true qi was indeed different. Chu Xiao could clearly feel the true qi wandering in his body and strengthening it. But Chu Xiao didn't feel anything when he practiced the vast qi cultivation method of the Chu family before. He could only feel a faint heat flow with his true qi, which was very vague. After practicing for a whole night, Chu Xiao directly sat cross-legged on the bed and fell asleep. When he woke up the next day, he didn't feel the slightest discomfort. Taoist martial arts are just and gentle. The more I practice, the more energy I will have. This is far better than other martial arts. Chu Xiao pushed the door open. There were more than 10 thick wooden stakes erected in the yard. Last night, Gao Bei had already brought some people to get these things. He picked up his dagger and flicked it. The dagger, which was emitting a sharp qi, suddenly issued a light sound. Martial arts had different levels. Naturally, weapons also had different levels. In Jianghu, Weapons were roughly divided into 9 levels, just like martial arts. The first 3 were ordinary weapons, the middle 3 were precious weapons, and the last 3 were divine weapons. Above the divine weapons, there were the legendary peerless divine weapons. Ordinary weapons in the hands of ordinary martial artists were ordinary weapons made by ordinary blacksmiths. Only those weapons made by master blacksmiths or swordsmiths with a certain reputation in Jianghu were precious weapons with their own names. The dagger in Chu Xiu's hand was made from refined or produced in the Nanshan mining area of the Chu family. Its grade should be around the 2nd level. Among ordinary weapons, it could be regarded as a relatively sharp one. Hiding the dagger in his sleeve, Chu Xiu didn't use his true qi. He practiced the Azure Dragon in the sleeve 1 slash at a time. No matter how simple or ordinary a move was, if you persisted in practicing it 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times, or even 100,000 times, it would become extraordinary, not to mention the Azure Dragon in the sleeve, which was not a simple martial art. While practicing, Chu Xiu was also visualizing the scene of the Azure Dragon going out to sea in his mind. His current dagger only had the shape of a dagger, but not the intent of a dagger. When Chu Xiu could cut out the dagger intent, his Azure Dragon in the sleeve would be really entered. Chu Xiu spent the whole day practicing the knife. He didn't know how many times he had chopped. Anyway, as long as his arm couldn't stand it anymore, he would start to practice the Xiantian skill to nourish his qi, and then practice again. Now, Chu Xiu had no talent, and his comprehension was unknown. He couldn't grab the opportunity, so he could only work on the aspect of perseverance. In the evening, Gao Bei came to deliver food to Chu Xiu. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Young master, I heard a news. Didn't the head of the family hand over the caravan to the Yan kingdom to you? But the stewards and leaders of the caravan are the people of the 2nd madam. They said that when the caravan comes back, they will give you a show of strength." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "They spread this matter so blatantly?" Gao Bei said, "It's not blatant. The news was spread by a maid of the 2nd madam, and that maid is also the concubine of the 3rd young master." A sneer appeared on Chu Xiu's face. This mother and son really didn't put him in their eyes. Perhaps in their plan, even if he knew that the stewards and leaders of the caravan were their people, he couldn't do anything about it. Unfortunately, this mother and son still underestimated the ruthlessness of Chu Xiu. Those who didn't listen to him were no different from dead people. "Gao Bei, follow me out of the city tomorrow morning. We will go to Shangmang Mountain and find the bandit leader Ma Kuo that you invited last time." Chu Xiu said. Gao Bei heard this and immediately shivered. Go to that place again? The scene of those bandits killing people last time had left a lot of psychological trauma in Gao Bei. Chu Xiu glanced at him and said, "What are you afraid of? Bandits are also people, and they won't eat people. Moreover, you have already been there last time. Why are you still so afraid now?" Gao Bei heard this and revealed a trace of a bitter smile. Bandits may not eat people, but they will kill people. The next morning, Gao Bei prepared the horses and set off with Chu Xiu to Shangmang Mountain. The Shangmang Mountain was actually not far from Tongzhou Prefecture. The last time Chu Xiu and the others walked for a few days, it was because there were too many people, and they had to drive a carriage, so they couldn't travel fast on the mountain roads. Now, only Chu Xiu and Gao Bei rode fast horses, and it only took them a little more than a day to arrive. The Chu clan didn't suspect anything, because in the past, Chu Xiu also often went out to play. In the Chu clan, other than Chu Xiu, the eldest Chu clan Chu Kai and the 3rd Chu clan Chu Sheng took care of the Tongzhou Prefecture's business, while the 4th Prince Chu Sheng stayed in the clan to practice martial arts and build a foundation. Only Chu Xiu had nothing to do. When he got bored of playing in the Tongzhou Prefecture, he would go out for a few days. In any case, as long as he didn't cause any trouble, the Chu clan couldn't be bothered to care about him. Gao Bei had been to Shangmang Mountain once, so his memory was pretty good. After turning left and right in the old forest, he soon found the stronghold of the bandit leader, Ma Kuo. It was a small stronghold completely made of wood and looked very simple. As soon as they arrived at the entrance of the stronghold, 2 small bandits jumped out with bows and arrows in their hands. They pointed at Chu Xiu and shouted, "Who are you?" Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Don't be nervous. I'm an old friend of your chief. I'm here to discuss business with him." At this moment, one of the lackeys finally recognized Chu Xiu and said with sudden realization, "I remember now. Aren't you that rich young master who was robbed and killed by third brother Lien last time? Wait a moment. I'll go report to the stronghold master. After a while, Ma Kuo came out with his men, but he didn't bring his heavy sword. Seeing Chu Xiao, Ma Kuo laughed and said, "Young man from the Chu clan, your Chu clan's oars are really good. The strongest weapon forged from them can reach the third transformation. What good business do you have this time?" Chu Xiao's eyes narrowed when he heard that. His previous guess was right. Ma Kuo should be one of the bandits. The quality of the Chu clan's oars was good, but even with the best oars from the Chu clan, they couldn't forge a weapon of the third transformation. A weapon of the second transformation was already the limit. A person who could forge a weapon of the third transformation with oars of this level could no longer be called a blacksmith. He should be called a blacksmith or a blacksmith. A bandit force with only a few dozen people actually had such a refiner. Just thinking about it made one feel strange. Chu Xiao bowed to Ma Kuo and said, "Chief Ma, I'm Chu Xiao. I do have a business to discuss with you, and it's a big one." Ma Kuo's expression turned serious as well. "Our camp is simple and crude. Young Master Chu, please come in and discuss." The last time Ma Kuo looked at Chu Xiao, there was a hint of mockery in his eyes. However, he could feel that this seemingly ordinary young man was not as simple as he seemed. How could someone who could injure third brother Lien, who was quite famous in the Shangmang mountain, and still talk business with them without batting an eyelid? Therefore, when Ma Kuo heard that Chu Xiao wanted to discuss business with him, he immediately changed his attitude. Ma Kuo was not being modest when he said that his stronghold was simple. The small stronghold didn't even have a decent house. The so-called meeting hall was just a random building made of wood. Chu Xiao didn't mind. He just said to Ma Kuo, "Chief Ma, the business I want to discuss with you is a little big. Can you ask your men to leave for a while?" Ma Kuo said calmly, "There's no need for that. These are my brothers who have been through life and death with me. There's nothing to hide." Looking at Ma Kuo, Chu Xiao said in a low voice, "Actually, I want to discuss this with the person behind you. I hope you can introduce me to him." Ma Kuo's expression changed when he heard this, but he quickly laughed and said, "The person behind me? Other than my brothers, who else do I have?" Chu Xiao said slowly, "Chief Ma, you don't have to hide it from me. I know you are not a bandit." Ma Kuo put away the smile on his face and put his hand behind the chair. He quietly grabbed the heavy sword and said, "What a joke! If I don't look like a bandit, what else can I be?" Chu Xiao looked straight into Ma Kuo's eyes and said in a low voice, "You are bandits. The remnants of the 36 northern bandits." As soon as Chu Xiao said this, not only Ma Kuo, but all the bandits' expressions changed. Ma Kuo raised the heavy sword in his hand and was about to slash at Chu Xiao. However, before he could slash with a heavy sword, Chu Xiao's knife was faster than him. A silver light flashed, and in the blink of an eye, it was already in front of Ma Kuo. An inch longer, an inch stronger, and an inch shorter, an inch more dangerous. At such a close distance, Ma Kuo couldn't even defend himself with his sword. He kicked the chair behind him and wanted to retreat, but Chu Xiao's knife was already on his neck. Feeling the cold blade on his neck, Ma Kuo didn't dare to move. The other bandits cursed and pulled out their weapons to point at Chu Xiao and Gao Bei. Gao Bei was so scared that he almost wet his pants. Chu Xiao said expressionlessly, "Chief Ma, calm down. I mean you no harm. If I wanted to use your identity, I could have just told the Northern Yan Imperial Court. Even if Wei County is not under the jurisdiction of the Northern Yan Imperial Court, a word from the Northern Yan Imperial Court will be enough to wipe out the local forces in Wei County. I will also be rewarded handsomely." Chapter 11. With a knife on his neck, Ma Kuo had no choice but to calm down. He waved his hand and asked the others to put down their weapons. He looked straight at Chu Xiao and said, "Tell me, how did you know about us?" Chu Xiao said calmly, "I guessed it. Master Ma's kung fu is pretty good. I can tell that you're not from an unorthodox background. And judging from your behavior, although you look like bandits, you're very obedient. You don't have the sloppiness of ordinary bandits. Moreover, Stronghold Master Ma mentioned the two words Chilean last time. This makes people even more suspicious. Other than the Chilean iron cavalry of the 36 bandits of the northern lands, bandits and Chilean together, I really can't think of anyone else." Ma Kuo smiled bitterly and said, Damn it, I didn't keep my mouth shut. In fact, although Chu Xiao said that he had relied on these detailed observations, he was actually able to confirm the identity of the other party because the original plot mentioned information about the 36 northern bandits. Small fights were called bandits, but when they were developed to the extreme, they would become great bandits who would plunder the world. There were 3 great powers in the world: Northern Yan, Eastern Qi, and Western Chu. Their strength was similar now, but a few decades ago, Northern Yan was extremely weak. It was attacked by Eastern Qi and Western Chu together. It couldn't even manage its external affairs, let alone its internal affairs. In troubled times, bandits rose up. In the Northern Yan Kingdom, groups of bandits quickly grew and became the 36 Northern Bandits. They were so powerful that they even dared to rob the Northern Yan Imperial Court and the major sects in the Jianghu. But later, Northern Yan rose again. It was said that the 36 Northern Bandits also offended the Northern Yan martial arts sect, the Northern Snowfall City. They were defeated by the Northern Yan Imperial Court and the Northern Snowfall City. The leaders of the 36 Northern Yan were either killed or crippled. They were no longer a threat. In the original plot, there was news that the 36 Northern Bandits had appeared in Wei County. It was because of this news that Chu Xiao could confirm Ma Kua's identity. Chu Xiao removed his saber and said calmly, "I know your background, Chief Ma, but I didn't announce it. Chief Ma should know my sincerity now, right?" Ma Kua rubbed his neck and mumbled, "Your blade is indeed fast, but if the distance was any further, I wouldn't have given you the chance to get close to me." Ma Kua put on a brave front and asked, "What do you want to trade with my boss? You can tell me first." Chu Xiao said in a deep voice, "I know the whereabouts of the leader of the Chilean Iron Cavalry of the 36 Great Bandits, red-faced Heavenly King Pang Hu. I wonder if this information is enough for us to trade?" Ma Kua was shocked and shouted, "Do you really know where the first master is? You're not lying to me." Chu Xiao said indifferently, "Bring me to see the person behind you. He will naturally be able to tell whether what I said is true or false. Moreover, I won't dare to lie when I get there." Ma Kua thought for a while and said, "All right, then come with me. My boss is at the Northern Mang Mountain. It will take a few days to get there." The Northern Mang Mountain was originally just a mountain range, but the mountain range in the middle was slightly smaller. The Tong State Prefecture was located in the middle, so the locals in Wei County called it the Northern Mang Mountain and the Southern Mang Mountain. Chu Xiao was currently at the Southern Mang Mountain, which led to the Southern Mountain mining area. The Northern Mang Mountain was located in the north of the Tong State Prefecture, which led to the Yan Kingdom. Ma Kua brought Chu Xiao all the way to the Northern Mang Mountain. It took them 5 days to reach the Northern Mang Mountain by taking shortcuts. In the Northern Mang Mountain, a sizable stronghold appeared in front of Chu Xiao. There were tall watchtowers around it, and it looked much more formal than Ma Kua's stronghold. Ma Kua explained, "After we came to Wei County, my boss built a stronghold here. But just in case, we have a small group of people scattered outside, just like my stronghold." Ma Kua whistled a few strange sounds, and immediately a few bandits came to him. They cupped their hands and said to Ma Kua, "Boss Ma, how come you have time to come back today? Who is this guy?" Ma Kua said, "An acquaintance. I will bring him to see the boss first." The bandits nodded and left. Obviously, Ma Kua had enough prestige here that he was worth the trust of these bandits. After arranging a meeting room for Chu Xiao, Ma Kua left immediately. Obviously, he was going to see the person behind him. Chu Xiao was not in a hurry. He quietly drank his tea. After a while, Ma Kua walked in with a tall and muscular man who was also in his 30s. He had a leopard's head and a pair of round eyes. This man was much stronger than Chu Xiao. He had reached the blood condensation realm, and from what Chu Xiao could see, he had even reached the peak of the blood condensation realm. He was only 1 step away from the Xiantian realm. The man looked at Chu Xiao, and a fierce aura came from him. He said in a deep voice, "So you are the one who said you know where the boss is?" Ma Kua quickly said, "This is Boss Han Bao. He used to be one of the boss's personal guards." Chu Xiao stood up and cupped his hands. "Yes, I am. Chu Xiao greets you, Boss Han." Han Bao waved his hand and snorted. "Don't talk nonsense. Tell me what you want. Of course, don't even think about asking for too much. Otherwise, I can pry the boss's information out of your mouth." Chu Xiao shook his head. Boss Han, you don't need to scare me. Actually, I didn't plan to trade this information with you. Now, I will tell you as a gift. As far as I know, after the boss was injured by the Northern Yan Imperial Court, Pang Hu has been hiding in the barren mountains and forests of Liaodong County in the north. He is recovering his strength and wants to make a comeback. Chu Xiu did not lie to them. In the future, this scarlet-faced heavenly king Pang Hu had indeed caused some trouble for the Northern Yan Imperial Court after he had recovered his strength. Unfortunately, it was only a small problem and was easily resolved by the Northern Yan Imperial Court. Han Bao was puzzled. You are not lying to me? There were people from the Northern Floating Snow City who participated in the extermination of the 36 bandits. The Northern Floating Snow City is in the north. Why would the boss continue to stay in the north? Chu Xiu said indifferently. The barren mountains and forests of Liaodong are uninhabited. Neither the Northern Floating Snow City nor the Northern Yan Imperial Court will enter it. Only some herb gatherers enter occasionally. Boss Pang Hu only wants to recover his strength, not to expand his power. This place is perfect for him. Moreover, you all should have heard of the saying that it is dark under the lamp. Even your own people did not expect that Pang Hu would stay in the north, let alone the Imperial Court and the Northern Floating Snow City. If Boss Han doesn't believe me, you can send someone to Liaodong County to take a look. There must be a secret signal that Boss Pang Hu left for you. From here to Liaodong County on horseback, it will take about a month. Han Bao's expression softened after hearing this. He cupped his fists at Chu Xiu and said, If we can really find the boss, I, Han Bao, will owe you a favor. Tell me, what do you want? Chu Xiu didn't say what he wanted. He asked instead, After we find Boss Pang Hu, what are you going to do? Han Bao said matter-of-factly, Of course I'm going to bring the people from the stronghold to seek refuge with the boss. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, That's not right. Boss Han, the head Pang Hu is currently recuperating. There's no point in seeking refuge with him. Instead, your actions will increase the risk of exposing the head Pang Hu. So I can guarantee that after the people you send meet the head Pang Hu will definitely let you stay in Wei Prefecture for the time being and listen to his orders. So what you need to do now, Boss Han, is to accumulate money and cultivation resources in Wei County to prepare for the future rise of the boss. Han Bao's eyes flickered. He was a boorish man. When he followed Pang Hu, he was just an ordinary guard, loyal and courageous. However, he wasn't an idiot. Although Chu Xiu's words sounded nice, he wouldn't just believe the words of an outsider like Chu Xiu. Han Bao asked directly, Chu Xiu brat, why are you so considerate of me? Although your Chu clan only has a bit of influence in Tong province, you are still a local tyrant. Don't tell me you want to join our Northern 36 bandits? Chu Xiu said in a low voice. What I want is very simple. I don't want to make a deal with you, Boss Han. I want to cooperate, a long-term cooperation. Cooperation? What kind of cooperation? Chu Xiu pointed at the Shangmang Mountain outside and said, Wei County is a lawless area. The Northern Yan rule over Wei County in name only, so there are bandits running rampant in Wei County. Even in this Shangmang Mountain, there are probably dozens of groups of bandits. However, these bandits have gone too far. They rob and kill, showing no mercy to the traveling merchants. Han Bao sneered, We are bandits, and they are merchants. Why should we show mercy to them? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, But it is precisely because of this that the merchants are afraid of the bandits that they don't take the small paths in Shangmang Mountain. Instead, they take the main road. Although it is time-consuming, it is safe. Or they arrange for a large number of guards to accompany them so that the bandits can't make a move. As more and more of these situations occur, the business of bandits in Shangmang Mountain will decrease. Han Bao frowned. Even the Northern 36 bandits of such a large scale had people specially assigned to come up with plans and strategies. He really hadn't considered these things before. Han Bao couldn't help but ask, Then what should we do? Chu Xiu said in a low voice, Nothing can be accomplished without rules. If there are no rules, then we will make them. The traveling merchants can enter and leave Shangmang Mountain as they wish, but they have to pay a portion of the money. After Boss Han receives the money, you can take the initiative to escort the merchants out of Shangmang Mountain. Anyone who has any designs on the merchants will be enemies with Boss Han. When the rules are set, and Boss Han's reputation spreads, The traveling merchants will take the initiative to pay you. Han Bao thought for a while and said, then wouldn't I be enemies with all the bandits in Shangmang Mountain? Chu Xiu said indifferently, it is enough for the entire Shangmang Mountain to have one voice. Boss Han, don't you have the confidence to deal with those mobs? Han Bao laughed sinisterly and said, of course I do. If it weren't for my injuries, I would have dealt with that bunch of trash long ago. Chu Xiu looked at Han Bao in surprise. It seemed like this person's peak strength was at the innate realm. He had misjudged him. Chapter 12. Han Bao was a boorish man, but he was no idiot. He could naturally tell if Chu Xiu's plan was good or bad. In the past, among the 36 bandits of the northern lands, there were some who specialized in giving them advice and suggestions. There were even a few leaders of the 36 bandits of the northern lands who were scheming and skilled in calculation. If Ma Kuo hadn't told him about Chu Xiu's identity, Han Bao would have wanted to recruit Chu Xiu into their stronghold. Although Chu Xiu's strength wasn't worth mentioning, based on what he had said today, this Chu Xiu had the right to negotiate with Han Bao. By the way, Chu Xiu kid, you gave me such an idea. I still don't know what you want. Chu Xiu said in a low voice. It's simple. I also have a caravan in the Chu family, and I hope that my caravan can enter and leave Shangmang Mountain without any obstructions. Also, since I'm cooperating with you, I hope that when I need you to help me kill someone, Boss Han, I hope that you can help me. A faint smile appeared on Han Bao's slightly ferocious face as he said, the first condition is not a problem. Although we, the 36 bandits of the northern region, are bandits by nature, we also pay attention to Jianghu morality. Since you have given me such a good idea, I will naturally agree to your conditions. But for the second condition, are you planning to use me, Han Bao, as your hired thug? Just this piece of information is not enough. Chu Xiu said calmly, only cooperation can be achieved through reciprocity. Of course, I can give you more than this, Boss Han. My Chu family is the local tyrant of Tongzhou Prefecture, and we also have an in business in Tongzhou Prefecture. Most of the caravans coming and going from Tongzhou Prefecture have to stay in our inn. I can find out all their information, including the route they are going to take, the things they are carrying, and so on. Han Bao's eyes lit up. If he had this information, his stronghold would not be left empty-handed. Right at that moment, Chu Xiu suddenly said, all right, in a few days, I'll send you news about the Chu clan's caravan. You'll be able to rob and kill them. Consider it my gift to Boss Han. Han Bao frowned. You want me to rob your Chu clan's caravan? What does that mean? A cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. That's the caravan of the Chu clan, not my caravan. Han Bao and Ma Kuo looked at each other and felt a chill run down their spines. In terms of viciousness, these bandits couldn't compare to these so-called aristocratic family disciples. They were so vicious to their own people, let alone to others. After Boss Han agreed to Chu Xiu's terms of cooperation, Chu Xiu agreed to contact the other party before returning to Tongzhou Prefecture. Gao Bei was also sent back by Ma Kuo's men. Gao Bei almost cried when he saw Chu Xiu again. Gao Bei had been dealing with these bandits for a long time. He was afraid that if he angered the other party, he would be killed. Seeing Gao Bei like this, Chu Xiu couldn't help but shake his head. Although Gao Bei was cautious and conscientious, he was too timid. After entering the city, Chu Xiu went straight to the Chu clan. At this time, there was a group of people in front of the Chu clan's gate, busy loading boxes of goods onto carts. It seemed like they were about to set off. Seeing this scene, Chu Xiu's expression immediately turned gloomy. Recently, there were no caravans coming in and out of the Chu clan. There was only one caravan heading to the Yan Kingdom, so it was obvious who these people were. But the problem was that he was in charge of this caravan. Now that he wasn't around, these people were ready to set off. It was just as Gao Bei said. The people in this caravan probably didn't intend to listen to him from the beginning. Who allowed you to leave? Chu Xiu asked with a gloomy expression. A 40-year-old caravan steward jogged over with a humble smile on his face. He greeted Chu Xiu and said, I am Zhang Quan, the steward of this caravan. Greetings. Second young master. This Zhang Quan's attitude couldn't be considered arrogant. In fact, it was a little servile. However, Chu Xiu still asked coldly, who is in charge of this caravan now? Zhang Quan smiled and said, "Of course it is under second young master." Chu Xiu looked straight at Zhang Quan and said coldly, "Since it is under my control, then who allowed you to load the goods and set off? How much money did you sell for the last batch of goods? What did you bring back? What are you planning to transport this time? Have you ever discussed these with me?" Zhang Quan lowered his head and put on a humble attitude. "Second young master, please forgive me. But at that time, second young master wasn't in the manor, and I couldn't find anyone to discuss it with. So I went to inform the patriarch and only left after he agreed. Time waits for no man. If I delay the caravan, then I will delay the money. But second young master, you can rest assured. I have been in charge of this caravan for so many years, and I have never had a single mishap. Of course, if you are really dissatisfied, then when I return, I will be at second young master's disposal." At this time, there were already many members of the Chu clan gathered at the entrance of the Chu residence. All of them looked at Chu Xiu with mocking eyes. Even an idiot could see that although this Zhang Quan's attitude was extremely low profile and humble, it was obvious that he didn't give Chu Xiu any face. He also didn't give him the chance to interfere with the caravan. However, compared to the arrogant butler Lu, although this Zhang Quan was only a manager of the caravan, he had traveled extensively and was very tactful. He was a wily old fox who wouldn't listen to anything. Now, in front of so many people, he had already lowered his attitude to such an extent. Moreover, he even talked about the interests of Chu Zongguang and the entire caravan. What could Chu Xiu do to him? Beat him up for no reason? He wasn't like butler Lu, who would be caught by Chu Xiu just because he said something wrong. Moreover, even if Chu Xiu really did beat him up for no reason, there would be people who would stop him in public. Moreover, Chu Xiu might even lose his position as the manager of the caravan because of this matter. A cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. He walked over and patted Zhang Quan's shoulder. He said in a low voice, "Manager Zhang, right? Very good, you have done very well. I just hope you won't regret it." A trace of pride flashed in Zhang Quan's eyes. He smiled humbly and said, "Thank you for your praise, second young master. This lowly one will never regret working for the Chu clan." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "It's good that you won't regret it. Manager Zhang, I wish you a safe journey." Zhang Quan frowned. Why did the words "have a good journey" sound so awkward? However, he didn't care too much about it. He was already on the third young master's side. He was destined to be different from this unfavored second young master. If he offended him, then so be it. It wasn't a big deal. The rest of the Chu clan members also secretly laughed and shook their heads. This Chu Xiu was still too inexperienced. He was left speechless by a wily old fox like Zhang Quan. After the crowd dispersed, Chu Xiu brought Gao Bei back to his courtyard with a gloomy face. Gao Bei was just about to say something, but Chu Xiu's gloomy face instantly returned to normal. He asked Gao Bei, "Can you find out the route of the caravan?" Gao Bei was taken aback for a moment, then nodded and said, "Of course I can. Every time the caravan leaves, it must be recorded in the Chu clan. That way, we can estimate where the caravan will be at each time. If they come back late, we will have to look for them. This is not a secret, it's easy to find them." Chu Xiu took out a piece of paper and wrote a letter. He drew a strange mark on it, then handed it to Gao Bei and said, "Go get the route map of the caravan and place it in a pile of rocks 3 li north of the city." Although Gao Bei was an honest man, he was not stupid. He could roughly guess what Chu Xiu wanted to do, and he couldn't help but shiver. However, he was already on Chu Xiu's side. Whatever Chu Xiu asked him to do, he could only do it. Otherwise, he could already feel the consequences from Chu Xiu's ruthless way of doing things. At this time, Zhang Quan's caravan had already left the city. One of the stewards came up to Zhang Quan and said with a frown, "Old Zhang, you've offended the second young master today. I've heard how the second young master treated butler Lu during the clan meeting. Ever since the second young master returned from the Nanshan mining area, he has become different from the previous second young master." Zhang Quan said nonchalantly, "Of course I know that, but don't forget how many benefits we've received from the third young master over the years, including that time when we were deceived and bought a pile of fake medicine. That matter was covered up by the third young master and the second madam. We are all servants of the Chu clan, but it's still uncertain who the Chu clan will belong to in the future. Since we've already chosen a side, we shouldn't be half-hearted. If anything happens, the second madam and the third young master will take care of it for us. Just like today, there's nothing wrong with my attitude. Would Chu Xiao dare to kill me? The Chu clan is a great clan, and since it's a great clan, it has to follow the rules. As long as we don't break the rules, Chu Xiao won't be able to touch us. The steward nodded, but he still felt a little uneasy. Chapter 13. When night fell, Zhang Quan led the caravan straight into the dense forest of Shangmang Mountain. There were only about 100 people in the Chu clan's caravan, so their ability to fend off the bandits wasn't that great. However, Zhang Quan and the others were veterans in this caravan, and they had a wealth of experience. If they couldn't fend off the bandits, then they could just hide. Shangmang Mountain was huge, and with their experience, they could easily circle around the bandits and sweep away all traces of their trail, leaving Shangmang Mountain safely. Even if they were unlucky and were discovered by the bandits, Zhang Quan and the others would decisively leave the goods behind and run. Although the bandits were ruthless and merciless, compared to killing, robbing was far more important. So if they encountered such a situation, the bandits would definitely go for the goods they left behind first, and Zhang Quan and the others would be able to escape easily. It was inevitable for a caravan to run into such situations. As long as they didn't get into trouble often, the Chu clan wouldn't blame them. They would make up for their losses with a few more trips. Zhang Quan looked up at the sky and whispered to the caravan, "Let's go a bit further. There's a fairly large cave up ahead. We'll rest there." Suddenly, a loud laugh sounded. "There's no need to go. If you want to rest today, you can rest here." Along with this voice, torches were lit, and the clanging of weapons could be heard. A dense group of bandits appeared in front of them. Zhang Quan's expression immediately changed. What was going on? He had only decided to take this route recently, and there weren't any bandits in the vicinity. Most importantly, even if he was really unlucky enough to encounter bandits, he should have been able to detect a trace of movement. Moreover, these bandits clearly seemed to know the route of their caravan and deliberately waited for them here. "Run!" Zhang Quan shouted and urged his horse to turn around and run. The other stewards and members of the caravan did the same. They didn't have time to think too much about it. However, the situation was different from what they had expected. The quality of these bandits was comparable to that of soldiers. Faced with the goods they left behind, the bandits didn't even spare them a glance, and charged straight for them. Moreover, the stronger ones among the bandits targeted the stewards of the caravan, while the ordinary cultivators of the caravan were ignored. Zhang Quan couldn't help but feel anxious as he watched the bandits catch up to the stewards of their caravan and kill them one by one. He gritted his teeth, pulled out a dagger, and stabbed it into the horse's butt. The horse neighed in pain and sped up. However, at this moment, a heavy sword flew over from afar, directly smashing towards Zhang Quan. Although Zhang Quan was the manager of the caravan, he had only practiced some basic martial arts. He had relied on his own methods to manage the caravan all these years, not martial arts. When the heavy sword smashed down, he subconsciously turned around and raised his arms to block, but his arms were directly smashed into pieces. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fell from his horse. Behind him, Ma Kuo walked over slowly. He picked up the terrified Zhang Quan and whispered into his ear, "Zhang Quan, right? Young Master Chu Xiao asked me to bring you a message. Steward Zhang, have a safe journey." The moment he heard this, Zhang Quan's eyes were filled with shock. He understood everything now. The second young master of the Chu clan had colluded with bandits to rob their caravan. However, Zhang Quan didn't have the time to feel resentful or regretful. Ma Kuo had already pulled out a dagger and stabbed it into Zhang Quan's chest. He twisted it with all his might before throwing Zhang Quan, who was already struggling to breathe, to the ground. Ma Kuo flicked the blood off the dagger and waved to the other bandits. "Go, open the goods. Let's see what young Master Chu has prepared for us." The next morning, news came from the Chu clan's manor. The Chu clan's caravan had been robbed. The entire caravan had more than 100 people. Not only had they lost all of their goods, they had also lost more than 20 people. Most importantly, the 3 stewards of the caravan were among the 20 people. None of them managed to escape. The Chu clan had been doing business for many years. The only time they suffered such a great loss was when they weren't familiar with the paths of Shangmang Mountain. In recent years, something like this had never happened before. In the courtyard of the second madam, Chu Sheng's face was a little gloomy. Mother, do you think this has something to do with Chu Xiao? Steward Zhang and the others had just offended Chu Xiao, and now something happened here. The second madam's expression was also gloomy. I don't know. Logically speaking, Chu Xiao shouldn't have the guts to do something like this. If the master finds out about this, even if he is the master's biological son, the master will cripple him. Besides, even if he has the guts, he doesn't have the power. The bandits of Shangmang Mountain are arrogant and unruly. Why would they listen to him? Last time, I spent 10,000 taels of silver to hire a small bandit gang. Where did Chu Xiao get so much money? Before we have evidence, we shouldn't spread this matter. Otherwise, the master will be unhappy. Chu Xing nodded, but at this time he suddenly said, why don't we dig out all of Chu Xiao's subordinates and ask them if they have any clues? The second madam coldly snorted. Chu Xiao has become much more cautious after returning from the southern mountain mining area. After returning to the Chu clan, he sent all of his subordinates to the southern mountain mining area. Now, we can't find them at all. The only one following him is Gao Bei. However, that person is his confidant. Since Chu Xiao keeps him by his side, he won't be afraid of us digging him out. Chu Sheng's face showed a trace of unwillingness. His opponent had always been the eldest son of the Chu clan, Chu Xiao. He didn't expect that Chu Xiao would suddenly appear and cause him such a big loss. The second madam waved her hand and said, all right, don't complain. The master will send you to a meeting later. Say what you should, but don't say what you shouldn't. Chu Xing nodded, turned around, and walked out. The incident with the caravan wasn't a big deal, but it wasn't a small one either. Because such a thing hadn't happened in many years, it alarmed Chu Zongguang. Some of the stewards, as well as Chu Xiao's sons, were called over to listen to the meeting. Inside the meeting hall, Chu Xiao sat there without the slightest expression on his face. Chu Shang, on the other hand, occasionally glanced at Chu Xiao. No one knew what he was thinking. Several members of the caravan, who had escaped death, still had frightened expressions on their faces. They recounted what happened that night, but unfortunately, there wasn't anything of value. They didn't even know the bandit's name, nor did they see the bandit's face. Those bandits killed everyone they saw, and they only cared about running for their lives. How could they care about such things? Chu Zongguang waved his hand slightly irritably and said, all right, I'll remember this lesson. Next time be more careful. Disperse. I'm going back to seclusion. At this time, Chu Xiao suddenly stood up and said, Father, the caravan is like a group of dragons without a leader. I'm willing to lead the caravan to Shangmang Mountain again. When these words came out, everyone present was stunned, including Chu Xiao's 3 brothers. Ever since the Chu clan had been established in the Tongzhou prefecture, apart from some open and secret battles with other clans, the number of people who died in the caravans was the second highest. Just like this time, if you were unlucky enough to encounter bandits, whether you could survive or not would depend on your luck. Thus, even if Chu Shang and the others managed the caravan, they would never follow the caravan. At most, they would be responsible for arranging the caravan's goods and so on. Chu Zongguang frowned and said, why are you following them? How can you lead a caravan without any experience? Chu Xiao said gravely, the caravan is currently in a state of panic. If they don't have someone with enough authority to lead them, when will they be able to resume their journey? Other matters can be delayed, but our Chu clan's pharmacy cannot be delayed. There are some medicines in the pharmacy that will run out of stock if we don't bring them back soon. As a direct descendant of the Chu clan, I should take the lead and inspire the people. Father, please allow me to do this. Chu Zongguang frowned. He hadn't expected Chu Xiao to be so enlightened. However, after thinking about it, he still said, then go. Be careful. Chu Xiao cupped his hands and walked out under the puzzled gazes of the others. The other 3 Chu Xiao's brothers didn't pay him any heed. This kind of strenuous, unrewarding, and even dangerous task, they wouldn't do it even if it was given to them for free. The caravan's members were all gathered in a small courtyard. Several dozen of them were dejected, and the Chu clan members who passed by pointed at them. This time they were indeed vexed. They were robbed as soon as they entered the mountain. They didn't keep their things, and many of them died. Some of them even developed a mentality of fear and didn't dare to travel with the caravan again. Chu Xiao parted the crowd and walked in. The group of people were also listless. Only a few of them stood up and cupped their hands at Chu Xiao. Greetings, second young master. Chu Xiao glanced at the crowd and said, "Pack up. The caravan will set off for the Yen Kingdom again." Hearing this, the people immediately became anxious. Someone immediately said, "Second young master, we just got into trouble. No matter what, we need to recuperate for a while and think of a countermeasure before we leave. What if we are robbed again after entering the mountain?" The other caravans also agreed. They were really scared out of their wits. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.